Scott, please take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Scott Becker. I'm editorial director of RedmondMag.com, and I'm pleased to be moderating our first session, as well as welcoming you today to our Cloud Backup and Recovery Summit, brought to you by Druva, Zerto, AvePoint, Clumio, and Metallic. The editorial team at RedmondMag.com has worked hard to bring together some of the best independent experts on this topic for this event, so we really hope that you enjoy it, and we think that you're really going to get some value out of it. Before we start today's event with these three great sessions, we do have some announcements. First, we wanted to let you know that this event is being recorded and it will be available for future viewing. So you'll receive an email when the replay is available, and generally that's within the next few days. Each session will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. So please be sure to put your questions into the Q&A area of your consoles that come up so we can get them answered for you by our experts. During today's third session, we'll also be giving away 3 GoPros. You must be present to win, so be sure to stay on for the entire event. Finally, we do have resources from our sponsors, Druva, Zerto, AvePoint, Clumio, and Metallic. They're available on the console right now, so please check those out. It's because of our sponsors underwriting this content that we can bring you the summit. So we thank them for sponsoring the summit and supporting the community. And we just ask that you check those resources out if you can, so we can bring more events like this to you in the future. Now, on to the first session of today's summit, the new Cloud Backup and Recovery Normal. So this session features one of our favorite presenters, Howard M. Cohen, who's the senior resultant at the Tech Channel Partner Results Group. And Howard has held senior roles at IT companies, and for as long as I've known him, he does writing, research, presenting, and advising on IT, technology, business, channel topics. So we're in good hands with Howard. Howard, welcome to the call, and take it away.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for the intro. That's very nice of you to say. Hello, everybody, and I think I can still say good morning, everybody. Or maybe we're just 2 minutes after noon on the East Coast. But today's topic is the new Cloud Backup and Recovery Normal. And from the beginning, I've taken issue with 2 of the words in our title. The word normal. In 40 years in IT, I've never known anything to last long enough to be considered normal. So we'll be talking about approaching cloud backup and recovery today in the current context of our time and the environment that we're in. The other word that I wanted to take issue with is the word new. There is truly nothing new about cloud backup. Let me explain what I mean. Come back with me 30 years to 1991. In 1991, I was selling a product called the Vault, actually a service called the Vault. The Vault was indeed a vault. It was hermetically sealed, halon protected. I remember the whole pitch. It was a place where your tapes would be stored. Back then, tape was the rule. Your tapes would be stored safely and available to you should you ever need them. This particular backup methodology used the FTAM protocol. You may not be familiar with FTAM. FTAM stood for Ford Truck Access Method. What happened was a Ford truck pulled up to each client's office, and the driver went inside and fetched the day's tapes. If, of course, you didn't have tapes because you didn't run backup, that became immediately obvious. You became immediately embarrassed, and it started to enter a really good discipline about doing backups. But back 30 years ago, the way to get backup off-site was FTAM, the Ford Truck Access Method. Hurdle forward 20 years to 2011. In 2011, I wrote an article for eWeek about the first steps to adoption of cloud. Now, of course, this is when cloud was new. And I was reaching out to solution providers in the industry, people who delivered computer services, who were now starting to adopt cloud. And I asked them, what are the cloud services your customers are asking for first? What are the most popular cloud services? And every last one of them said something similar to this. Cloud backup seems to be the wedge to get into the customer with regards to the cloud. What we used to call remote backup or online backup or internet backup is now cloud backup. Now, those of you who were around in that time know that if you wanted to market a service or product at that time, you had to call it cloud something, otherwise it got ignored. Well, cloud backup really was cloud backup. It was an offsite data center connected to you either via leased line or the internet. And every day your data was going across that connection and being backed up elsewhere, which means that cloud backup really predates cloud because we were doing it long before that. And we were doing it over modems at one point in time. How crazy does that sound? But again, the area where we're seeing the most interest immediately is offsite backup. You couldn't even call it cloud yet. This has been around for a while. And so it was always a good idea to back up cloud. But today, cloud is a much more complex environment when it comes to backup and when it comes to data in general. So where do you start when it comes to cloud backup? And I suggest that you start with why. Those of you who've seen my presentations before know that I frequently advertise Simon Sinek's book here because I think it's a great concept. I think it's important. You need to start with why. Why are we doing this? Rationalize what it is you're going to do before you go ahead and do it. And I mean, the most obvious rationalization, the most obvious reason that you'd want to do something is to save money. And according to the Aberdeen Group, cloud-based backup can reduce the total cost of lost productivity by 95%, especially when you have remote offices. That's a big chunk of change. Also, IDC says that 90% of organizations are using the cloud for data protection, and 70% of CIOs today have a cloud-first strategy for deploying their applications. So this is the new normal. Let's look at it for what it is. Especially since COVID, where everybody had to go home to work, cloud became an obvious advantage. Connect everybody to the cloud and let them communicate with each other, and then use the cloud as the central point of control. So welcome to the new normal. Cloud data backup has become the new normal. I've collected a few tidbits from around the industry press talking about why people should consider cloud data backup. One pointed out that if you take all the application development that's happened over the last 40 years, that's going to happen again in the next the next 5. But again, compression. We're going to have a lot more applications rushing out, especially now in the age of microservices. Applications are being rushed to market faster and more accurately, with more quality than ever before. We're going to come back to this time and time again. It's probably the most timely issue that's confronting us, ransomware. We've seen huge ransomware attacks recently. We can expect to see more. One of the best hedges against falling victim to ransomware is to have a backup copy of your data that is as current as possible somewhere where the attackers can't get at it. And we'll go deeper into that a little bit later. Of course, it doesn't take an outside influence for data to get into trouble. You can have data corrupted simply because of a hardware fault or a human fault. People often delete things that they're not supposed to delete. So again, having that backup somewhere nearby for rapid restore is a boon because it minimizes your downtime. You need to have your data and your applications constantly available, especially in a time where everybody depends upon them. Most businesses today depend upon applications to continue running full time. Love this one, modern workload movement. And again, this is kind of like microservices moving in containers. You've got to be able to move quickly between your on-premise components and your cloud components, even if you're in a multi-cloud environment. Things are moving faster around a bigger territory than they ever have before. You've got to be able to keep up with them, and that means that your backup strategy is going to be a lot more sophisticated. Data availability must move in tandem to assure the greatest agility and meet availability SLAs. Fact is, it's the same thing said a different way. Regardless what caused the disruption, people, hardware fault, attacks, everything needs to remain available. And what suffers is your reputation with your customers. Reliability is something they look to you for. It's huge. When you go down, they don't really care that you had a computer problem. They just know that they're not getting what they need from you. Some stats to take a look at. The adoption of cloud has grown 87%. It continues to grow at pace, and doesn't look like we're turning around. Cloud computing has had a positive impact on data protection strategies. Well, that's kind of a natural. First of all, it instills a discipline. When the system is doing the backup automatically, you don't have to hear somebody saying, "Oh, I forgot to run the backup last night." And so more than 2/3 of users surveyed use backup as a service. And BaaS, backup as a service, is becoming more and more popular. The value proposition of cloud-based data protection is the same as cloud is for many other things. It's secure. For a long time now, we've known that cloud providers can spend a whole lot more on security than we can. You can deliver against your restore point objectives and restore time objectives because it's infinitely scalable. Your costs are reduced and your compliance is improved. We'll talk more about these as we move on. Bottom line, if you've been reading all the bullets that I collected from all over the industry, it's all about the data. Now, data. I'm going to make Scott very happy. This is his favorite slide right here. Many people have called data is the new bacon, or data is the new oil. Whatever you compare it to, data has been recognized as among the most valuable assets any company owns. Without it, the cost of losing it is tremendous. So it's all about the data, and it's all about keeping the data safe. I wanted to point out that your data is your responsibility. It is true that the cloud services have a commitment that they make to protect your data, to keep systems running that are protecting and securing your data. But read your cloud services agreement very carefully. At the end of the day, you have fiduciary responsibility for your data. And while all of the big hyperscaler cloud providers have great, resilient, reliable security, it's fantastic, who's going to lose their job if the data is lost or corrupted? Not them. So in a very real personal sense, your data, your responsibility. Cloud simply eliminates all the hardware, software, all of the things, and a lot of the costs involved in backing up data. It reduces it down to a simple, budgetable, repeating cost. But all the threats, the malware, the ransomware, all of the things that keep us up at night, they're still out there, and they're still going to be functional, and they're still going to attack, whether it's cloud, hybrid, or still all on-prem. Those attacks are going to continue. Okay, so we've looked at a lot of reasons for wanting to move to cloud backup if you haven't already. Let's take a look at some of the challenges that face you when you start to move to cloud or when you continue to expand upon your cloud backup capabilities. For one thing, there's more and more to back up. It just keeps on growing. Obviously, if you're using Amazon, Microsoft, or Google, they do provide a backup service, but again, you are responsible for your data. So if it's me, I want to have a hedge. You have to think about how much more protection you want to provide. Some of you are using the alternative cloud services, the smaller cloud services. As you're finding, in many cases, they're more responsive and they're more intimate in their relationship with you, and that can be very powerful. Great. But again, they don't necessarily have all the powerful data backup capabilities of the hyperscalers. But you have to decide, is what they're bringing enough? A lot of you are using software as a service. There's many services out there that are really easy to gain access to. But again, the data that you generate in those services, in that software, it's got to be protected. You're using Office 365, Microsoft 365. You're using Google Apps. You're using some productivity suite. Again, you're generating data, and that data has to be protected. Now, most ERP systems are moving online, like Dynamics 365, perfect example. The data still has to be protected. Doesn't change just because the applications come to you through the cloud. Some of you still have on-premise storage. It's got to be protected. Some of you are moving to multi-cloud and involving yourself with multiple hyperscalers. There are plenty of good driving reasons why, but you have to remember that just as you expand your cloud presence, you have to expand your backup provisions for it. And then, of course, let's not forget endpoints. You still have users who must keep their data on their device. I don't know that that will ever change. Those endpoints need to be protected so that the data stays safe. They have to be included in your plan. We've talked about it a couple of times. We'll talk about it in more detail. Ransomware. It's very front of mind. We've seen public ransomware attacks, and everybody in every news outlet is talking about the fact that the private sector really has to protect itself, and maybe we ought to compel them. Nobody should have to compel you to protect yourself. You really need to look at ransomware as a real threat. It's more of a threat than most because it's not digital. Part of it is analog. Part of it attacks people, humans. Humans are analog, and humans are fallible, and humans make mistakes. The social engineering aspect of ransomware is really where they can get you. The volume of attacks, 145 million in the U.S. last year alone, is frightening. That's a 139% increase over the previous year. It's more than doubling every year, and it doesn't show any sign of slowing down. These attackers have realized that it's easier to attack people than to attack systems. So they're going to keep on doing it. The thing is, even if you've backed up your data, if the data's on the same network, ransomware encrypts that too. So if they're attacking your live data, they're very likely attacking your backup data at the same time, which means you've got to be even more careful and create an air gap between your backup and your network. In other words, your data's got to get off the network. There's got to be a chunk of air between the network and your data. And there are ways to do that, and we'll talk a little more about that later. But your plan needs to include always maintaining one copy, not only off-site, but off the network. This way, they can't encrypt it, and you can always restore it, no matter what happens. Last year alone, almost 2/3 of enterprises were hit with a ransomware attack. And 3/4 of those resulted in success for them. They're very, very efficient. They're very, very effective. They do their job well. There are now services you can use that will do the ransomware attacks for you. So it's getting worse, and you've got to be more careful. One of the things you must be doing, if you're not doing it already, is you need to be encrypting your data, all your data. And I'm not saying just when it's in transit between locations. Everybody does that. Everybody is encrypting data in transit. But you also have to encrypt it at rest in storage, because some attackers attack the storage. And so it's always got to be encrypted. This way, there's no chance of being able to use the data. You know, if they do indeed steal the data in an attempt to sell it, they won't have anything to sell. At the same time, you've got to make sure that your backup user interface does not enable anyone to change or delete your backups. That functionality should not be there, because your attacker may be within. In this way, if a hacker gets your credentials and get onto your console, there's really nothing they can do. We mentioned this earlier, and it's another of the challenges that's being created by advances, right? Cloud-native microservices. Applications are being migrated to cloud-native, meaning no longer are they one big block of code where if anything goes wrong, the whole system comes down. Now they're being more granular. They're being broken out into microservices that perform each of the necessary functions. Each microservice stands alone. Each one is contained along with all of the libraries and other resources it needs to function. And each container can be transported wherever on the cloud or in the clouds it's needed to be. It can move across the network instantly. Very powerful, very resilient. If a microservice fails, it is destroyed and reinstantiated right there. So you really don't have downtime caused by the application anymore. And that's powerful. At the same time, it's more complex and requires more planning and a more sophisticated backup strategy to accommodate cloud native. You need cloud native data backup to back up cloud native applications. Hopefully, all of your companies are growing, and therefore you're concerned about scalability. You want to know that as much data as you have, you can meet your restore point objectives and your restore time objectives. You know, the data may be increasing, but time isn't. Time is immutable. Time stays the same. So you need a better strategy. And the way you approach cloud data backup, the way you start, will definitely determine how far you can go, how far you can scale before you have to forklift your solution out and put in another one. Something you don't want to do. You want to be able to preserve your investments for as long as possible. So again, this is important. It is definitely a challenge that you face, thinking through how do I make sure I provide sufficient scalability. Of course, many of you are subject to regulatory acts, HIPAA, PCI, Sarbanes-Oxley, some of the older ones. No service and no product can be compliant unto itself. A service or product can enable you to be compliant, but it is you that the government is concerned about. You must be compliant. That spans not only your technology, but what your people do, all your processes and procedures, documentation of everything. You need a service that can be a compliant business associate, BA. As long as you have that assurance documented from your cloud provider, you should be fine. But it's something you need to look for in your cloud provider. If you're subject to it, they have to have an agreement in place with you that they will maintain compliance as your business associate. Okay, we've looked at a lot of challenges. We've looked at a lot of good reasons why. Now let's look at how. Let's look at how we go ahead and start to choose the right cloud backup provider for us. Notice that I said cloud data management. I did not say cloud backup. The reason is that today, data has to be considered data, no matter where it is, whether it's your live data, a backup copy, a replicate of your data, doesn't matter. It's data. And so you need to think of data holistically and manage data holistically so that you at all times know where all your assets are, what condition they're in, how available they are. It's all one thing. So your platform has to make it possible for you to gain visibility and management of your data, no matter whether it's live or not. This means you're managing your data end to end, literally. And if you don't have that comprehensive visibility, you don't have the right solution yet. You can look at this as paying the same attention to backup data as you do to live data. Consider all of it data. Manage it as one contiguous thing. We begin with policy. When establishing a data cloud backup strategy, we begin with policy. You need to have a policy in place, especially if you're subject to regulations. You have to have a policy. You have to show that you've adhered to your policy. Your policy can be very minimal, maximal, but you said it, you adhere to it. It has to be zero touch. Nothing is trusted until it is proven. And you have to assure access from the device, from the individual who's logging in. It's not good enough to be looking at their location and their IP address. You have to know that they themselves are a valid access into your network. You have to have a complete inventory of all the critical data sources, data assets, and all the systems that are going to be protected. End-to-end has to be cataloged, documented. You have to have a complete definition of what the administrator of this system is responsible for, so that at any time you can go back and determine whether or not they're adhering to their requirements. You want to establish a firm, detailed, exacting retention policy. This is where you can get tripped up by public procedure. If you establish that your data retention is 1 month, then that data better be out of there after a month. And it better still be there before the month elapses. Want to make that a year? That's fine. Your policy, your adherence. Off-site rotation, we have to make sure that the medium is being rotated. Back in the days of tapes wore out far more easily than people realized. You know, there was a joke, yeah, it backed up, but will it restore? The worst time to find that out is when you need to restore it, which is why testing became so important. Today's media are much more reliable, but still, you don't want to use the same medium over and over again for years. You want to, especially offline media, you want to make sure that you're rotating fresh media in. The restore process. You have to have a completely cataloged, documented restore process so that whoever's going to perform it does it the same way and properly. Same is true for your failover process. If you have redundant servers or redundant data centers, you've got to make sure that when the time comes that they fail over properly, that the restore restores properly. So testing has got to be scheduled and executed on a regular and consistent basis. And you have to determine where your backup storage is going to be, somewhere other than where your live data resides. Remember the 3-2-1 rule. This is the easy way to remember it. The 321 rule simply says that you must have at least 3 copies of your data. You must use at least 2 different media types to store that data, and at least 1 copy has to be stored off-site. And I would add now off the network. Critical. Now, that's a lot of work. And actually, it's one of the driving reasons many people have moved to cloud. Let the cloud provider do it for you. They're going to observe the 321 rule if they've indeed contracted for that. So this takes a huge workload off your people, a huge responsibility, something that can very easily get messed up, and puts it where somebody has signed on the bottom line that they're going to get it done. Okay, let's talk now in more detail about ransomware. This is scary stuff. There are 3 things that you really need to think about, and 3 areas that you need to provide solutions for. The first one is detection. This is tricky. An email comes in, a phishing email comes in, looks like it's genuine. It comes from a major bank, a major manufacturer, a major associate of yours. It's got their logo, their coloring, their layout, their typefaces. By the way, that's a good list of all the things that you should be checking and teaching your people to check. Are those things there? That's the first, layer of safety. If they're not, don't do anything with that email. Report it immediately to your IT department. Let them handle it. But if you're fooled, if your user is fooled, there's a link there that they're being asked to click on or an attachment they're being asked to open. Don't do it. Don't click that link. Don't open that attachment. That will open the door to the invader coming in, corrupting your data, stealing your data, destroying your data, and making it impossible for you to restore unless either you pay the ransom or you have a backup copy that they can't reach. After detection, the second step is prevention. By the way, I apologize. I skipped over a little bit too quickly. There are behavioral analysis software products coming out that now detect anomalous behavior by people on the network. They actually help identify phishing emails. This is new, but there are products out there worth exploring. Any layer of protection you put in place is a good thing. They use artificial intelligence, machine learning techniques to help learn what a good email looks like and compare every other email coming in from that sender to the known good. Worth looking at. Second layer is prevention. You need to put in place a lot more scrutiny, a lot more in the way of security measures. The most important security measure you can put in place is user training. You can train your users to recognize phishing emails. Not saying you'll make them perfect or expert, but you'll raise their awareness. You'll raise their ability. And you'll prevent some phishing emails from getting through. So it's critical that you provide training and refreshment and updating on a regular basis. Keep it front of mind with all your people, because once the phishing email is there, the door may get opened and the headaches begin. Prevention, of course, don't ever let it get to you. That would be great. Not easy to do. There are no products that totally protect against phishing emails yet. But having zero trust in your access methodology is critical. Don't make it easy for somebody who isn't authorized to connect to your network. And again, I can't say it often enough. You have to have encryption both in transit and at rest, and secure your keys. Do not provide the key to your cloud providers. They don't need it. They have no need to look at your data. The payload is not important to them. Do not share your key with your provider. You will find in your contract that most cloud providers will tell you in the contract that if your data is subpoenaed, they'll just hand it over. So if they don't have the key, they hand it over encrypted. Then you at least get to find out that the government subpoenaed it. Otherwise, you're not notified. Then finally, after detection and prevention, is recovery. If we failed in the first two, we have to be ready to recover. And then again, that means that we have a copy of the data that is air-gapped. If indeed the attacker is super sophisticated, gets your live data and your backup data, you still have that air-gapped copy you can then restore and close the door. You should always have a copy that can't be changed. Once the data is copied, it's locked, and nobody can ever change it. And at the end of the day, you've got to have the ability to shut down, disconnect from the network, make it impossible for attacks to continue until you've taken an assessment of what's going on and can restore safely. Finally, some considerations when selecting a provider. I'm bringing up all of the headings at once just so you can review them. And again, this deck will be available so you can refer to these as you will. But let's just move through them while we still have time. Reliability and availability. Reliability depends upon consistent operation. Operations need to be carefully documented and carefully executed. You can't have people doing things in different ways because it becomes unpredictable. You always have to have a backup immediately available. So you have to start thinking about how to keep a backup copy in proximity. There were times when your backup service actually had to record a disk and FedEx it to you because restoring all your data over the line would just take too long. That is still possible, but you need to think about how quickly you need to come back and base the closest available. You may need to keep an off-network copy locally. One size does not fit all here. If you're storing different data types, make sure you're using the most appropriate type of storage to accommodate each different data type. And if there's any one thing that I would want to enforce over and over again, it's constant testing. It backed up, but will it restore? You have to make sure it will. You don't want to wait until you're in the midst of a disaster to discover that your backup is no good. I've had clients go through that. It's not pretty. And it's a painful, painful thing to have. You also need to establish with your providers a very well-defined uptime SLA. 5 nines is preferable. There are some very popular services that only offer 3 nines. Make sure you're aware of that. Okay, next up, zero trust. Again, the cloud service provider is responsible to you for their infrastructure, that it works properly, which includes access control, includes making sure that the device and the user are both authorized, not based on where they are, but based on the configuration of the device and the successful offering of credentials. Because again, the data is your responsibility. If it's corrupted or lost, if you experience excessive downtime, they're going to look at you, not at the cloud provider. Yeah, the cloud provider may lose your business. You may lose your job. So, that's the priority to me. Again, the 3-2-1 rule, they'll do it for you, and let them do it. should always be using single sign-on and without a doubt be using multi-factor authentication. There's just no reason not to, especially in a day where everybody can use their mobile phone for the multi-factor authentication. There's certainly biometric authentication capabilities. There's all kinds of ways to authenticate yourself to a network. Don't get caught using just one. And again, AI and ML have given rise to a lot of amazing anomaly detection software that can help you maintain a zero trust security environment. At the end of the day, though, with everything else, you have to be able to quickly and easily locate that last good backup. Know exactly where it is at all times, and know exactly how quickly you can restore it. Compliance and privacy. Using any particular cloud provider does not make you compliant automatically. Your policies, your procedures, what your people do, how you document it, all are involved. You won't pass audit if they're not all absolutely correct. Yes, they need to be a compliant business associate, but you have to be a compliant business. Remember also that secure and compliant are not the same thing. You can be completely secure and still not be compliant, and you can be compliant and not be secure. So approach each separately. Focus on security with one team, focus on compliance with another. There is the issue of data localization. Where is the data stored? Where is it physically located? Some countries have rules that your data must be stored domestically. You have to observe rules about how data is shared internationally in some countries. It varies. You need to know, if you're operating in multiple countries, what the rules are in each country and remain compliant with them. The catch-all phrase that we've all used all the time is data sovereignty. Some countries have a very different approach to it, a much more severe approach to it than others. Be sure that you're familiar. Some of these regulatory programs include GDPR, CCPA, which has finally come to the United States. Hopefully the rest of the country will follow California's lead. Be sure that you are fully observant of data sovereignty. It can get ugly if you're not. Simplicity, this is my favorite one. If your cloud provider doesn't make it easier, doesn't make your life easier, they're the wrong CSP. They're the wrong cloud service provider. Your life should become easier. You are offloading functions. You are offloading activities to the cloud. And therefore, that should free up your people to do all kinds of better, more valuable, more enriching and fulfilling things. Any cloud service should be relatively easy to deploy, easy to operate, and easy to scale. If you have to make a major adjustment simply to accommodate scaling, that just shouldn't be in the cloud. That cloud provider is doing something wrong. They should provide frequent updates, and they should all be automatic. They're operating the infrastructure. They're the ones who get to approve the updates. You shouldn't have to worry about that unless it's pertinent to your applications. Then you need to have a good communication link on that. You need to make sure, and this is very fundamental, very basic, that the core certifications are in place, the security certifications, the regulatory ones that apply to you. And also that your cloud service provider has very clear, very definitive, very understandable policies, so that you know exactly what you can expect and so forth. I could go on for an entire session about pricing. The problems are, there are all kinds of data egress fees, other fees that can sometimes surprise you. You should be aware of them. There should be a financial manager on your management team, on your cloud management team, who's responsible for staying on top of all the cost reduction programs they introduce, price change. Prices are continuing to go down due to competition. You want to make sure you are aware of that when it happens, so you're not overpaying for a period of time. You need to decide that consumption-based pricing is the right mode for you. Otherwise, you may want to just simply do all you can eat by seat. Make sure they have a marketplace that makes it easy for you to identify the services you need. They all have tons and tons of services. You need clear definitions because they differ. Different clouds may call the same service by different names, and they may call different services by the same name. So again, you need to study and understand all the services and understand how things are licensed. Application licensing in the cloud is still more an art than a science. Stay on top of it. We talked about scalability. There should be no change in performance as your scaling increases. It should be easy to request and release resources. That's what cloud is all about. You should not have to think about scaling. If your system requires it, if your needs change, the system ought to be able to detect that and respond quickly. Again, as little human intervention as is possible. You should be working on an optimized network. You should reduce your data load by deduping, eliminating all duplicates. We all have tons of duplicate data. Get rid of it. You're transporting it. That can be costly and it can slow you down. You can also manage the bandwidth, but again, the smaller the data load, the more efficient the bandwidth can be utilized. We could talk again for hours about disaster recovery. Yes, cloud providers provide redundant data centers, which means you don't necessarily have to have redundant systems. However, you, on the other hand, may prefer what I refer to as belt and suspenders protection. In other words, make sure that you keep your pants on. Not only cloud, but your own backup methodology as well. BDR is a great example of that. And again, your disaster recovery plan goes beyond just this, beyond just the data, beyond just the cloud backup. It also goes to who's going to go where, who's going to do what in the event of a disaster. It's a much more extensive plan. Take the time. Especially after what happened during COVID and other things we've seen recently, you want to take the time to make sure that you're prepared to respond in the event of a disaster. And finally, let's talk about the future. APIs, application programming interfaces, are going to become more and more and more important to us. They already are, because interoperability is key. Everything's got to work together. Systems have to work together at the core and at the edge. People have to be able to work together. This means that standards have to be established and adhered to, especially in the Internet of Things, where you have products from all kinds of manufacturers that are going to have to work together. In EDI, we've always had to have EDI is a consistent set of protocols for commerce support. We all agree this is the way we're going to do it. The ability to integrate with other applications has become a competitive attribute. When you look at an application, say, do I want to use this one or that one? Very often, one of the things you're going to look at now is what other platforms do they integrate with? Because it's going to become it's going to become the standard. Everything should work with everything. It's not here yet, but that's the direction we're moving in, because I think we've already recognized no application is an island. No application stands alone. And we're in an environment where systems have to talk to systems and people have to talk to people. I hope this has been helpful in guiding your process as you determine whether you're moving to cloud backup if you haven't already, or whether you need to change your cloud backup strategy if you're not sure that it's giving you everything that you need. I want to thank you all for your attention. And Scott, are there any questions?
Yeah, we have a few. Great stuff, Howard, and covered a lot of ground and a lot to think about there. Appreciate it. And if you have any questions, type them in. We've got a couple of minutes here. One here is anyone still backing up on premises? Is there, in your view, is there a good reason?
You know what? I am sure there are. I would say that, given that we have been backing up remotely for decades, it would be surprising to me. I think that, for example, individuals, I don't back up locally. I back up to a cloud service. I actually back up to 2 different cloud services for redundancy. But I just, I can't imagine anybody wanting to maintain the hardware. A drive is a mechanical device. It's going to burn out eventually. And eventually can be sooner and sooner. I'd rather have professionals taking care of my data. And so cloud lets me do that. I'm sure there are. But I think slowly but surely they're becoming more and more the minority.
Another question here, you used the term air-gapped. What does that mean in a cloud era? What does air-gapped mean?
Okay, I think the technology or the name comes from electrical technology, in that if a circuit overloaded, the circuit would automatically air-gap, disconnecting devices from the actual circuit so that they don't get burned out. In this environment, air gap simply means that there is a space, a gap between a copy of your data and the network. The network is not connected to the device that your backup is stored on, or the media that your backup is stored on. If you remember Battlestar Galactica, all of the devices on board the Galactica were air-gapped. Nothing could be allowed on the network. That's the concept. Nothing gets, something doesn't get connected to the network. There's a gap between it and the network. I hope that's clear.
It is. Yeah, that's super. That's probably about all the time we have for questions. We did get one comment. Someone was asking about the slide deck, and those are available. They're on your console, so all the way to the right of the slide area. You can download the slides, all the slides from today. Thanks, Howard. Great stuff as always. Really appreciate your time and your effort on this topic.
Glad to be here, Scott. Thank you.
And everybody else, stay tuned. We're going to take a short break and be back at the top of the hour for our second session of the day, which is Top Cloud Backup and Recovery Best Practices for every IT pro. Take a moment to check out those resources on your console, provided by our sponsors, Druva, Zerto, AvePoint, Clumio, and Metallic. And we will be right back.
right, can you hear me? Okay. Can you still hear me? Okay. So I'm connected via the webcam, but with the camera off, and all I'm hearing is music. Got it. Okay.
Welcome back to our second session. David, please take it away.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here, and also thanks to our speakers, my fellow moderators, and of course our sponsors, Druva, Zerto, AvePoint, Clumio, and Metallic for underwriting this summit and allowing us to bring you this great content. My name is David Rammel, and I'm here to moderate the second session of our Cloud Backup and Recovery Summit, called Top Cloud Backup and Recovery Best Practices for Every IT Pro. Our speaker for this session is Greg Schultz, founder and IT analyst at Server Storage IO. Greg has worked as a customer in various IT organizations in different roles, as well as a vendor, consulting analyst, and author of several books, including Software-Defined Data Infrastructure Essentials. Greg brings a diverse background with real-world perspective across applications, data infrastructures, hardware, software, and cloud. Greg is a Microsoft MVP for Cloud Data Center Management and previous 10-time VMware vExpert. Greg, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Great. Thanks, David. Hello and welcome to this session, Top Cloud Backup and Recovery Best Practices for IT, for every IT pro. Part of the Cloud Backup and Recovery Summit. I am Greg Schultz of Storage.io, as David just introduced. And here's a brief look at, I better advance the slide if I'm going to say that. Here's a brief look at what we're going to be covering today. Just real quickly, The question is not what if something happens to a cloud provider or its technology, including the hardware, software, and network configuration, as well as what is its impact on your application. Rather, it's what can you do today to be prepared for when something does happen. After all, only you can prevent cloud data loss or cloud data damage. Granted, the service provider has some responsibility. It's actually a shared responsibility, but we're going to get into some more things like that as we work through the next 15 minutes or so during this session. So anyway, what are we going to do? We're going to talk about why clouds need backup and recovery, and there's going to be some context there we're going to go through. Data protection and backup gaps, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about rethinking data protection, which includes backup and recovery, from old school to new school, even future school, as well as using new and old things in new ways, along with speeding up backup recovery and trust yet verify testing and training, as well as questions from you, the audience. So we look forward to that. All right, let's just move right along here. Real quickly, the big picture, setting the stage. It's about data infrastructures. Data infrastructures are what exists to support the business applications, enabling applications to transform data into information. And data infrastructures can be on-prem, they can be a core data center, they can be in the cloud, they can be out at the edge, they can be all different shapes, sizes, using different technologies that incorporate the hardware, the software, the compute servers, the data storage, the I/O networks, all the software that ties it together, the operating systems, the apps, the databases, along with the policies, procedures, best practices that tie all those things together into the services that support legacy as well as emerging applications. All right, so that's the big picture. But something that we'll be reinforcing as we go along here is over on that far right is about the idea of different layers, different focus areas, down from the low-level protecting a volume or protecting a system, moving up the stack, maybe protecting a file system, moving up the stack, protecting a database, all the way to a granularity of protecting an individual table or an individual mailbox or an individual file. And that's where granularity comes in, Appleware comes into play. So as we build out on this, why clouds need backup and recovery? Well, there's a lot of context that comes into play here, and that context really comes back to what is it when you say cloud backup and recovery? Is it that you're backing up your on-prem core to the cloud? Is it that you're backing up your on-prem edge to the cloud? Is it that you've moved all your apps, all your data, all your processing into the cloud, but you want to back it up there? Or are you using it in a hybrid? Are you using where you're still doing, and many environments are still doing on-prem, on-premises data protection backup with an extra copy going to the cloud or vice versa? So we're seeing a lot of different approaches, but the context, what are you protecting and backing up restore from? This gets to that context of scope, an entire system, volume, file system, or database to the cloud. Are you on-prem edge to the cloud or an endpoint? Are you protecting the legacy, bare metal, virtual machine, or containers? Or are you protecting from within the cloud, from one cloud provider to another, maybe from AWS to Microsoft Azure, or from Microsoft Azure to IBM, whatever you happen to be working with, and across software as a service. So, for example, you may be leveraging Office 365 or Salesforce or many other apps that they're protecting your data, but are you relying solely on them? If you stop protecting any data locally and just put it all into the cloud, well, what happens if there's an O365 outage? What happens if there's a Salesforce outage? What happens if you can't get to your data anymore? Well, that's where having a copy of it either back to on-prem or to another cloud provider comes into play. Sure, those providers are going to take care of your data, but what happens when you can't get to it and you need to get to it? So these are some of the things that we're going to touch on and look at. And as I mentioned before, protecting across, up and down, different layers from low to high level. So what this also comes into is it's about protecting your organization's information, your apps, your data, as well as your data infrastructure. And what this means, there's a lot of talk about, hey, you know what, back up your data. Well, you better back up your application, because that means not just the data for the application, but the software itself, the settings, the configuration, keys, other sorts of information, all the things that are needed to be able to bring that application, to be able to bring those components back or to go forward when something happens. It's not if, it's when. So part of this ties into, on the cloud, yes, clouds have some data protection. There's different levels. But this is about enhancing, extending, building in, and enhancing your data infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or all in the cloud or some sort of hybrid. It's about enhancing, extending on the capabilities that are there. But again, that idea of application-aware, granular, durable, and making sure things are accessible when and where needed. It's about being prepared, protected from events that can lead to the disaster. In other words, if you can't restore an individual database table, well, what if you then have to resort to bringing back an entire database? Well, if you can't bring that back, does that mean you have to bring back a whole file system or a whole volume? Well, if you can isolate down to the particular components that need recovery, restore, refresh, whatever it happens to be, if you have that more granular capability focus, now you've got options where you don't have to restore everything and risk something else happening. But it's also about breaking chains, that if those chain of events aren't broken, that can snowball, can cascade into a bigger, broader disaster. So it's about being able to stop something quick, restore something quick before it escalates and goes into something more severe. So it's about enabling the R's. The R's, restore, recover, restart, resume, roll back, resilient. There's a lot of other things that start with R. So let's continue our journey and looking at, there we go. We'll try it this way. All right, sorry about that. So continue our journey. Why clouds need backup and recovery? Again, that application-aware and granular protection. It's protecting against different threats that can impact at different layers. It's not a old-school, one-size-fits-all, grab everything and back it up. It's leveraging data protection at the database layer, whether it's database replication or snapshots, checkpoints, consistency points. It's leveraging things at the file system level. It's leveraging things at the storage level. Having different layers of protection that give you that ability to restore, restart, refresh at different recovery points at different intervals. So what this also means is, what are the technologies? What are the tools? It's the hardware, the software, the cloud service providers, the networks, the storage, data footprint reduction, which we're going to talk more in a moment. We heard in the previous session about dedupe. Dedupe is just one of many tools that fall into the bigger, broader data footprint reduction toolbox. That's all about reducing your data footprint using different techniques, from compression to dedupe to archiving and many others that we'll expand on shortly. But it's also about having technologies and techniques such as different protection intervals, different frequency, retention, policies, having immediate protection versus time-delayed protection, having instantaneous asynchronous versus time-deferred, different storage protection using replication, RAID, whether it be mirroring, parity, erasure coding, as well as high availability cluster failoring and a lot of other type technologies. These are all tools, techniques that are at our disposal to be able to align to support different objectives. All right, so what should be considered under this idea of why clouds need backup and recovery? Well, let's back up here, pun intended. The considerations, your needs. What you require versus what you want to have, what's your budget. But it really comes back to protecting across those different focus points and also different recovery points. Now, the thing about recovery point, that is the point in time that you want to be able to recover from. That's where those intervals come into play. The recovery time is how quickly you want to have that. But we want to bring in this notion of that granularity, but also layers. So recovery time is how quickly you can have something back up and running. How quickly can you have a database running again? Well, when we talk about RPOs and RTOs, we have to have that context of, is that the recovery point and the recovery time of, say, having a storage volume restored, or having a file system restored, or having a file restored, or a database, or a table, or the application now ready to process that? Is it cumulative, or is it to a particular point in that stack that we've just talked about, the different pieces? There could be a cumulative, which is the app, what the user sees. The storage volume might be, say, recovered in 15 minutes, but then more time is going to be needed for getting the database back into proper shape. Maybe that's another 5 to 8 minutes. So the end user might see a recovery time of 25, 30 minutes, but yet somebody says, hey, we had it done, our piece was done in 13 minutes, and ours was done in 4 minutes, etc. So while you have to have those objectives at the different layers, ultimately to the user, the consumer, it's how those all come together. So we have to keep that in focus. So a couple of other things to consider is how many faults or failures do you need to be able to tolerate? How much availability, how much durability, how much accessibility do you need, do you want, and can you afford? And here's the thing. Not everything is the same. Not all apps are the same. Not all data is the same. Not all usage is the same. So why are you treating everything the same? Maybe that's because it's how it's always been done. Well, we're going to talk about rethinking all of that. And it might be that we have to recover this way because we're protecting at a coarse level. We're protecting an entire volume, an entire disk, an entire file system, an entire database, as opposed to having that granular to bring back a table or go back to a particular checkpoint or consistency point. That's where having those different intervals come into play at different frequencies as well as where they're protected. Some other considerations to be thinking about is transitioning to user-initiated backups and restores, and are these full backups, or do they appear like they're full backup, but yet underneath they might just be point-in-time copies, snapshots, incrementals, but that give you that ability to bring back things on a different granular basis. So again, this comes back to the technology, the tools, the techniques, policies, people training, all those things coming together. And one other consideration here is cost. With the cloud, there are costs. One of the things that we keep seeing is many organizations were able to decrease their CapEx or capital expenditures by going to the cloud. Guess what? Maybe your organization is one of these is you saw an increase of surge in your operating expenses, your OpEx, because you've shifted the spending from one side to the other. So with clouds, I don't know of any reputable cloud provider that hides their costs. Nothing is hidden. It's all out there, but you have to go look for it. You have to be aware. You have to go in eyes wide open that it's maybe no charge to use their network to put your data in, but there's going to be a charge to pull your data out. What does that mean? So, and they'll tell you what their costs are. You have to go look at and pull up their calculators and their tools. They don't hide it. You have to go look at it. That's part of that responsibility. But you also need to be aware of they're shifting the infrastructure, the data infrastructure to that provider, but you're still managing it. You're still having to manage, make sure that everything is running okay, that everything is protected, that there are no coverage gaps that are bad. So part of that is the cost for the infrastructure or the services, but also the cost for the recurring management on your side of things. All right, so when we talk about backup and recovery, clouds, data protection focus areas, there's a lot of different things. There's different threat risks. There's the different needs for protection at different levels, different layers, how and where to protect, a lot of buzz terms in here, a lot of different topics, from encryption to domain controllers to name services, a lot of different things, keys and key management. But our main focus area is going to be up there in that top right, around the green there. In other words, what's in the cloud. All right, so let's just walk through real quickly here a couple of different scenarios. And with these different scenarios, what we're seeing here is I've got like little letters there. So down in there in the lower left, still protecting on-prem. Yes, very common still that many organizations are still protecting to some degree a copy on-site, but also sending copies off-site. There are those that just send everything off-site, whether they're small organizations, big organizations, but generally the larger organizations, even the medium size, will still keep a copy on-site. Even a lot of smaller organizations. I know myself, I still keep copies of things locally, but I also have a copy in the cloud, and I have a copy somewhere else that's offline, or what we like to call air-gapped. So it really comes back to what are you doing for different needs, for speed of recovery, but also using new and different tools in different ways. So that's that scenario A down there in the lower left. And that could be for bare metal, legacy, virtual machine, containers, at different layers. Then there's the B, sending the data off-site. That might be sending your tapes off-site. It might be sending removable hard drives off-site. It might be sending removable solid states off-site, whether it's sending them to a facility to be stored in case you need them, or using those mediums to ship them to the cloud provider. If you need to send a large amount of data relatively quickly, more than what your networks can support, one of the ways to do that is the major cloud providers have services that allow you to bulk move data. For example, Microsoft Azure has the data box, where they ship an appliance or some drives or a big platform to your location. You copy the data onto it. It's safe. It's secured. It's encrypted. It gets shipped back to one of their data centers. It shows up in your account. Then you can do that bulk move to the cloud, so to speak. So that's that scenario B. C, you're protecting maybe to local A. You're also sending something off-site, but then you're also sending a backup or an archive or a protection copy to some cloud. D, you have that option now of restoring locally from A, or maybe from B, or from D, from the cloud. Another scenario in here is, right below that, is where you're replicating. You're replicating either in real time or with a time delay between your on-prem, which might be your primary, to your secondary, which could be at a cloud. If we move up to the top right over there, we got a couple scenarios. E, that you're protecting from your app that's running in the cloud right back into that cloud. But what you're doing is protecting at a higher level in the stack, higher up in the application layers there, either to that cloud or to a different one. That's E. Right above that, an endpoint. Maybe you've got a remote site, an edge location that you're protecting, and you're bringing that data back to the cloud. And again, over in that far right, that's just reinforcing. We've got these different layers that we're protecting at the storage layer, at the volume, at the file system, at the database, at the app, the different layers there. H, that's an example of protecting from Office 365 or Salesforce or many other commonly used apps, protecting those either back to your own cloud account somewhere, or it might even be back to an on-prem. G, that's protecting from one cloud, say AWS to Azure, or Azure to Google, or vice versa. And K, that's just an example of backing up or replicating from an on-prem or a cloud-based database, MySQL, SQL Server, any of the other NoSQLs, whatever it happens to be, such that you have that layer of protection. So I'm just giving you a bunch of different scenarios. It's not a all or nothing. It's really about what is your environment, what are your apps, what are your data infrastructure needs, requirements, and what affects you. And the key is, how is the different technologies and tools going to align and work for you versus you having to change your environment, your apps to work with them. Okay, so real briefly here, I mentioned that clouds have protection built in. And there's a couple of concepts in here that we're just going to touch on real quickly. And I should mention, all of these examples that we're going through here, these are all material that are covered in multiple chapters in my book, Data Infrastructure Essentials. That was at the beginning and at the end of the deck. I'll give you a link to that as well. But with clouds, clouds have availability that is defined as accessibility plus durability. So one of the things that can be kind of fun to listen to is we hear about 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines availability. And then the cloud providers come along and say, yeah, but we can do 15 nines. And then the vendors start jumping up and down saying, that's impossible, you can't do 15 nines. Well, what it turns out you can, but there's a big caveat here, because what they're talking about is availability equals the accessibility plus the durability. Okay, and how do they have 15 nines? It's real simple, by having multiple copies of the different systems and distributed across multiple locations, where it's the sum of their parts make it very durable, plus having that increased accessibility at a coarse layer, okay? Then vendors will jump up and down and say, yeah, but that's not apples to oranges, and, you know, okay, no worries. The key point is, what is it that they are doing? What is it that they're protecting? They're protecting against a drive failure, a server failure, a data center failure, and if you really want to go to it, even a availability zone or region if you want to go further. And this is where I mentioned earlier is that you are responsible for preventing cloud data loss, because the cloud service providers give you those tools, those basic systems that have that durability. It's how you choose to use those, define them, configure them, set them up, and leverage them, as well as layer additional tools and technologies and your best practices upon them, that everything is available then. Their volumes might be online, but is your application offline because of a database issue, a database table problem, or a missing file? So that's what we want to talk there, is that there are these different components that tie into the foundations of that availability. So I want to real quickly here, I've talked about the layers and the different threat risks, okay? Why are you protecting? What are you protecting, and from what? Well, these could be at any layer, up or down that stack. But they also, the idea being here is that you might be protecting against a ransomware, a virus, malware, theft, damage, denial of service. It might be accidental or intentional. It could be an external or internal technology failure, a configuration error, whatever. And even though I put those 3 rows of threats, they're not unique. They're not explicitly tied to any one layer. They could impact any of the layers from the applications down to that lower level of the devices. So that's where that protection needs to come in, but it really comes back to what is it you're protecting and from what and why, and then it comes down to what's the value of your data, your applications, your information services. How can we then start to align everything across the different locations, services, technologies, tools, but up and down those various stacks? Well, let's dig into that. First is gaps. There are gaps. There are data protection and backup gaps. There is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Some gaps are good. So, for example, air gaps are good, where you're isolating the access to a protection copy. They're offline. They're not accessible. They might physically be they might physically be offline. They're disconnected. They're not even powered up. Or it could be that they're powered up, it's just that they're not connected to a network. whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. The key is that it's isolating access, physical and logical access to your data so that it can't be infected, it can't be corrupted, it can't be damaged, or anything bad happens. And by the way, when we talk about ransomware and malware, we talk about protecting the apps and the data. You've got to protect your infrastructure as well, because your backup, your data protection software, that needs to be protected. How it's set up, how it's configured, the catalogs, the indices, all your metadata, that all needs to be protected as well, because if that gets infected, how are you going to recover? What are you going to do? So air gaps are good. So are time gaps. Time gaps are your recovery intervals. Those are the points in time that you're going to recover from. That's where you're going to go back to a particular time, a particular location in time to bring a particular version or a copy or a snapshot or to restore from. Those are all good. Bad gaps, gaps in time. You missed a protection interval. You missed when something was supposed to have been backed up, copied, snapshot, consistency, or a checkpoint. A gap in coverage is the data is not protected. You thought it was being protected, but it wasn't. Something slipped through the cracks. Something happened that the protection didn't occur that was supposed to. And then there's gaps in consistency. That, yeah, you might be protecting something, but is the data itself good? So a lot of times we hear about data can't be recovered from disk or from tape or solid state. Well, it turns out the data may be recoverable from any of those mediums, but that there's a problem in the software or the data that originally got copied, something is wrong. But it's easier to point the finger at the hardware than at the software or the configuration. So those are they're bad gaps, but they're detectable, that you can find those gaps in coverage, you can find where the data is missing, you can find those inconsistency points and correct them. Because what you don't want are the ugly, and that is the recovery gaps, what you thought was recoverable. The missing copies, they're corrupted, they're damaged or bad, where there's bad configuration. The worst thing that could happen is you might have 3 copies of data spread over 2 different systems. One of them's offline or in the cloud, and find out that they're all corrupted, that they're all bad, they're all infected. And so the big thing with ugly is that there's a problem. You want to find it early on, you want to detect it, you want to do coverage analysis. So this brings us into rethinking data protection, including backup and recovery. And what does this rethinking mean? Well, it's multiple things. It's building upon the cloud technology capabilities that are already there, that are part of the infrastructure, that data infrastructure. It's about reducing the cost of data protection without compromise, supporting growth, enabling more versions, time intervals, and copies to be made, protecting against legacy and emerging threats, boosting the performance, application-aware fine-grain as well as bulk protection from different locations. And also addressing, are you protecting your network configuration and other devices and their various settings? Or are you treating everything the same? Everything has the same backup policies, protection intervals, retention cycles. So this sets up going from old school to new school protection paradigms. And what does this mean? Well, we've heard about earlier about 3-2-1, the classic grandfather, father, son, or having 3 or more copies, 2 or more devices, at least one of them off-site, hopefully off-site, and hopefully offline. All right, well, old school is using new things in old ways, doing course protection. In other words, you swap tape out and you put disk in, but you use disk just like you always have, just that it's not tape anymore, it's disk. Or maybe you put solid state in, but you're still using it in the old way. Full backups, full snapshots, whatever it happens to be. And maybe also old school, the focus on the backup speed and cost overhead cost reduction. Leveraging backup, some archiving, maybe some dedupes, snapshots, and replicas, as well as the classic old school 3-2-1 protection paradigm. New school is using new and old things in new ways providing both coarse and granular recovery. It has a focus on speed of recovery, reducing the impact to apps with a better value proposition of value protection as opposed to overhead. Leveraging different types of data footprint reduction, DFR, on a wider basis. Leveraging cloud, snapshot, replications, and the idea of new school 4-3-2-1 data protection. 4 or more versions, 3 or more copies on 2 or more different devices, systems, at least one offsite, on cloud, and air gap. All right, so what does this really mean? It's real simple. And some will say, well, geez, the three really is, it's having the versions and the copy. Well, let's make it explicit. That example I gave you, what if you have 3 copies and they're all corrupt? What if you have 3 versions but only 1 copy? Well, sure, you got another one off site, but can you get to it? Okay, so the idea is to explicitly spell out, and you can flip the 4 and the 3 around if you like. In other words, you can have 4 or more copies or 4 or more versions. That's fine, as long as you have that 3 or more of the other. The whole point is explicitly call out that you have those protection intervals and that you've got multiple copies of those protection intervals spread across different systems or devices or mediums with 1 or more that are off-site, hopefully also offline. Okay? So that's the idea around 4-3-2-1. Now, this is where usually people say, have that big concern that, hey, wait a minute, that's going to cause our protection costs just to go right through the ceiling. Yeah, if you do data protection old school way. If you use new and old technology in old ways, yeah, you're going to run into that. So what we have to look at is start thinking about using new and old things in new ways, and that is everything is not the same. Why treat everything the same? Rethink what to protect and why, when, where, and how often. I mean, think about it. How much insight do you have into your systems, into your apps, into your data? How much of it's changing on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Yet how much of that data that's static is being protected as part of a course backup, a full backup monthly? Well, do you really need to be backing everything up at those same coverage, at those same points, or can you rethink that? Can you archive it? Or maybe can you move it to an active archive where there's a protection, a master, a gold copy, but that the data that's not changing doesn't have to be protected as frequently. Again, everything is not the same. So rethink it. Rethink what you're protecting and why. What's that value versus how much you need to invest in it? And that's part of it. The data, the apps that have more value, invest more in them. But rethink things. Leverage different types of data footprint reduction to reduce that impact. That can be archiving. It can be rethinking, modernizing backup. It can be compression. It can be compaction. It can be network bandwidth optimization and acceleration. It can be using dedupe. It can be using different storage protection mediums. So it's about using new and different things in different ways and protecting at different levels with that different granularity. So it's about shifting the cost of backup data protection to that of the value of the recovery and restoration, and leveraging the cloud in new and different ways. All right, so moving along, what are some examples? Well, I gave a couple already. Swapping tape for HDDs for disks or for solid state. Yes, you're still doing full backups. Or maybe you were doing incrementals to tape. That's where tape gets abused a lot, is people say, tape is slow. Why? Well, try to bring back one file. You should really be doing those granular restores from solid state, not even disk. But that's part of rethinking. Rethink how you have these different tools, these different technologies, and what you can do. Same thing happens where new software comes along and it gets swapped out, but yet it gets configured in the same way. It gets used in the same way with the same policies because that's how it's always been done. So it's revisiting, rethinking, and sure, there's the focus on cost reduction and utilization, but there also needs to be that focus on effectiveness and on productivity and enablement. And again, avoid treating everything the same. So backing up, speeding up that backup recovery. What's more important, the speed of the backup and its impact, or the speed of the recovery? It's going to vary. It's going to change. It's going to be different things for different people. But how do you do that? Well, what are you designing and optimizing your data protection for? Those specific threat risks to specific applications in their data? Is it about reducing cost and overhead? Is it about leveraging a particular tool or technology or techniques? Is it about that backup speed of the recovery? Or is it about reducing the size of your what's protected to help reduce cost? So again, a lot of organizations see data protection as an overhead, so it doesn't get invested in. You need to invest in it. That's where that conversation with the business people needs to be put in business terms. It's not about the cost of protection. It's what's the value of having that information there. Evolving from the old, it's an insurance policy discussion, to having that policy that actually is bringing more and additional value, and that risk of if it's not there. That value that if you can recover and be online faster than your competition, that's business value. And then if the business people are asking you how to justify or quantify that, have them quantify that value of getting a new customer or retaining a customer. Get them involved in that analysis. Okay, a couple of other items here. You can also speed up backup and recovery by throwing more resources at the problem, hardware, software, network, cloud, people management, or reducing the number of backups or frequencies. That's all about cost cutting. That's compromising. Now, some apps, some data, that's where you have to rethink. Maybe some things are being overprotected while others are being underprotected. Balancing things out. Avoid treating everything the same. And that's also where we come into the data footprint reduction, reducing the impact of that expanding data footprint, leveraging different granularities, of course, and using new things in new ways. Real quickly, this is just that idea of having that granularity and protection intervals. And this could be at a system level, at a volume, a storage device, a file system. This could be at a database, an email. It could be at different layers within the stack. But just that basic notion is that you've got the ability to go back in time using different techniques to be able to facilitate a granular restore or a very coarse, bulk, fast restore. It all comes back to what are you protecting it against, but also what are you most commonly having to restore or recover for? If your most common restore requests are to bring back a file, why are you having to bring back a whole file system? If it's literally the DBA say, hey, I need a database restore, have that conversation. Hey, sure, we can bring that back, but if we have the ability to bring back a selective table, would you like that? They might say, well, yeah, then we wouldn't have to bring a whole database back. But they might say, yeah, that would be good for some things, but we still need the ability to refresh an entire database. Okay, good. So we have those different capabilities. All right. So again, this is another way of looking at the granularity at different levels. And you could flip this upside down or use that as is, but think of it as the file system, you got the database, the database tables, you've got system settings, all different layers. Where is it and what is it that is that focus of that restoration, and what can you do about that? Well, let's tie this back in. I've touched on data footprint reduction, DFR, and it's reducing that impact of data application growth in the overhead. So it's about supporting growth, doing more with the resources, and it's evolving from storage efficiency and utilization focus to effectiveness and productivity. It's not just about dedupe ratios. It's also about rates and performance, as well as data that doesn't dedupe. It's about using different technologies, tools, and techniques across the different workloads and the apps. It's enabling more data protection versions, what we were talking about there with the 4.3.2.1 new school, those intervals, those copies to be made without causing more cost. In other words, it might be cost neutral, but increasing your protection capabilities. So some of the technologies and tools I touched on, which is archiving, life beyond compliance. If there's an aspirin for data protection for IT, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem, it's archiving. Why? If you've got a lot of data that's out there that is just static, but it needs to be read, put it in an active archive. If you've got data that really doesn't need to be out there, get it into an archive, but yet that can be brought back as need be. So really think about that. It's one of the most powerful capabilities because it can reduce that size of that footprint of what's being protected and then all the subsequent copies. There's another big one that starts with an A, and that's the assessment, the analysis, the insight. Having situational awareness of what you have, how that data is changing, when it's changing, how often it's changing, and how much of it has changed. The backup modernization, rethinking versus just retooling or retechnologing. It's rethinking what you're going to protect, when you're going to protect, how you're going to protect, at what interval, and also from what level of coverage. There's cleaning up, compressing, compacting, as well as consolidating. Data deletion, data management and dedupe, network optimization, bandwidth optimization, space-saving snapshots, storage, tiering, thin provisioning, and many more. So here's the thing. If you can reduce the amount of data that you send into the cloud, when you have to bring that data back out, your subsequent network egress charges are going to be lower, okay? Think of it as thinning down. Think of it as traveling. If I'm going to take a big, giant suitcase with me on a trip, I've got to lug it around, I've got extra baggage fees, stuff like that. But if I can thin down what I really need to take with me, or really squeeze it and compact it, use different techniques to really make it smaller for traveling. I can travel lighter, I can travel faster, I'm more nimble, I've got a lot more options. Okay, so there's a lot more there to DFR. We could spend an entire session on that, but it's something that's important that plays into this. All right, so this is putting some things together. This is putting all these different topics, these ideas back together. The protection intervals, the point in time, copies, consistency points, checkpointing, different levels, different granularities, using different tools, techniques, but getting back to that idea of what are you protecting, why are you protecting it, and how you can rethink that, how you can start using the cloud in new and different ways as opposed to simply swapping your tape out and backing up to the cloud, but yet using the cloud-like tape. Well, yeah, you've got some transition there, but are you really leveraging all the capabilities that are there? Okay, right before we wrap up here, trust yet verify, testing and training. That includes your technology, the hardware, the software, the cloud service platform, as well as your techniques, your policies, your tools, and your people, the practices. Can you restore an application, data, certificate, keys, permission? Have you actually tested that, being able to recover from a particular medium? And yeah, you check the box, yep, we were able to read the restore. Oh, great. Did you actually then, once it was restored to disk, tape, solid state, whatever, actually try to use it without causing a disaster and being able to see that, yeah, everything is there, it is usable, it is functioning, yeah, or that you find something. That's how you find a bad gap before it goes ugly. So it involves different layers. It tests regularly and randomly. Have an area that you can safely restore and test with without causing a problem. Can you do a partial or a full? Can you do an end-to-end? But have that testing and training environment for testing things out, trying things out, training, without causing a problem. And that's the key point. Do not cause a disaster as a result of a restore or testing. All right, let's wrap up here. We've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. A lot of different stuff here. In some ways, we're just scratching the surface. But recap, what can you do next? We're going to get into the Q&A here in just a moment. Not everything is the same, so why treat it the same? Gain and maintain situational awareness into your environment. What are your apps? What are the workloads? How is the data changing and evolving? Know your biz and app requirements along with the profiles. The best solution is the one that works for you instead of you having to work for it or that particular provider. Keep different stack and layers in perspective, that up and down, those different layers. from the database to the storage. Keep all those in perspective, and only you can prevent cloud data loss by leveraging the best practices of the cloud provider, but also taking additional steps that you're layering on and what options you can choose. Where to learn more? My site, storageio.com, my blog, StorageIO blog. I'm on Twitter, @StorageIO. My email address there, greg@StorageIO. And I invite you also to check out my books, a couple of which are samples here. I've actually got several others, but the relevant one there is that blue book. And with that, David, we have time for some questions?
Yes, we do, Greg. Thanks. Good stuff. I'd like to remind the audience that we can answer questions up until about 5 minutes to the top of the hour in order to give you a short break before the next presentation, so send them on in. So let's get right to it. First question in the Q&A box. Should we have our network people make sure the firewalls, routers, and devices are backed up?
Yes. Could I make that any simpler?
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess the real question is, you ask them, hey, are you saving the configurations for these devices to somewhere? And their answer will probably be, oh, yeah, great. And then they just go out and scramble and quickly. The same thing, everything we talked about, especially those multiple versions, multiple copies, is that you want to have those configurations such that if you find out that, hey, somehow somebody actually managed to inspect a firewall, a gateway, a router, an AP, whatever it happened to be, that you can wipe it clean and reset it because you got a copy from a particular point in time. And then likewise is working with the network folks is give them a secure place that they can put a copy of their settings and that they're in a known good state and location.
Okay, next question. Can you give us some more examples of coarse versus fine grain and Appleware?
Yeah, so Appleware, an easy one on Appleware is, say, Office 365, where you've got that awareness of what's going on within Office 365 that you're able to protect an account, protect individual items or entities. That might be a file, it might be a presentation, a worksheet, whatever that happens to be. Another example being protecting within a database is that you have that ability to back up a specific database, but also to be able to protect and restore to an individual table. Another example of fine grain would be being able to bring back a particular file. For example, maybe you're using Exchange or email, maybe you're using Outlook, and you get that error that your Outlook, your .pst file is corrupt if you're still using those. Well, rather than restoring and rebuilding everything, maybe you can just bring back a good copy of that .pst or whatever the particular file was because you know you have a good copy of it. Worst case, you run a repair tool on it and voila, everything is back up and running.
Okay. Here's a question from Robert. He says, we are an Office 365 customer. Would you recommend backing up that data to Azure Blob storage or a different cloud?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this for a minute because that's part of it is, rethinking it through. If I'm protecting it, the first thing is, yes, I would protect it to somewhere, okay? So if we're relying on Microsoft and if we're saying we're really concerned that if something happens to Microsoft that could impact O365 and even Azure, then I want to have that copy somewhere else. On the other hand, if you trust the fact that, well, the chances of O365 being impacted and regular Azure, particularly blob storage, bulk storage, if you're comfortable with that, if you're okay with that, then that would work out as well. So that just goes back to what is your concern that you're trying to protect against?
Okay, looks like we have time for one or maybe two more questions. Here's the next one. How do you do a cloud backup restore ROI?
Yeah, so it's like anything involving ROI, you have to have an idea what your costs are, okay? So you say you're doing your ROI of cloud versus, say, on-prem. So it's stating your assumption, stating what your basic premise is. So we say it's going to be on-prem traditional versus moving the destination portion to the cloud, okay? So one of the assumptions that we know right off the bat is that if the workload is going to stay on-prem, we know that part's going to be the same for both of them. And then if we say, well, the software being used can be the same, maybe there's a different add-on module. If so, you add that in the column for the cloud. Then on the cloud, you would subtract out whatever your whatever hardware cost, network cost, storage, server, whatever your costs are on the on-prem. You would take that out of the cloud column, but you would make sure it shows up in the on-prem column. You would add your software costs to each column. Then on the, as well as any staffing changes, keep in mind that even if you do go to the cloud, you are going to have some staffing costs, some management costs, whether it be initial or recurring. So you may see some costs, you may see some facility costs drop on the on-prem side. But then you have to factor in your cloud costs, the cost for the service, the cost for the storage, any virtual machines, servers that you're going to need to run any software, but also your egress charges. How much is it going to cost you when you go to pull the data out of that particular tier? And what's that network charge going to be? Anyway, you add those up, and now you've got that basic number that you can compare on what that's going to be. But then you want to go one step further and look at, there's the one time, but then what's the recurring cost? That's a really, really simple thumb scale on the back of a napkin ROI.
Okay, great detailed answer. And it looks like that's all the questions we have time for. Thanks again, Greg, and everyone else. Please stay tuned. We're going to take a short break and be back at the top of the hour for our third session, Hottest Third-Party Products, and the giveaway of our 3 GoPros, which you must be present to win. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our third session. Olivia, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Yerzar, and I will be moderating today's session. I am so excited to welcome you back to our third and final session of the day, the hottest third-party products. Some quick notes before we go ahead and get started. I want to take a moment to thank you for attending. We're so excited you're here. It's going to be a great presentation, so thanks so much for joining us. And of course, the important note is please be sure to stick around to the end, not only because you'll be eligible to win 3 GoPros in our random drawing, but also because we'll have a survey pop up towards the end where you can give us your opinions of the event. And please share your honest opinions. Our editors read in detail, and this really does help us shape our future events. So please give us your honest take on the event. As we get started, we really want to take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsors, Druva, Zerto, AvePoint, Clumio, and Metallic. They're sponsoring this event because they believe in this community and they want to support events like these. So please, please, please take a moment to show your support and appreciation by downloading the resources you can find in the audience console and visiting their site, contacting them for a demo, or reaching out for more information. It's really through their underwriting of these events that we can bring more summits to you in the future. So thank you again, Druva, Zerto, AvePoint, Clumio, and Metallic. We are so thankful you're here, and we're so thankful you're spending some time with us today. But with that, I really want to announce our first speaker, W. Curtis Preston, the Chief Technical Evangelist at Druva. So with that, Curtis, please take it away.
Good morning. Thank you very much. So good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you happen to be. I happen to be in Pacific time here in California, so it's morning for me. So we want to talk about data protection for the cloud era. And when we talk about that, we are in this new world where one of the common phrases that I like to say is that the data center is no longer the center of data. And so while I spent, I've been in the data protection industry for coming up on 30 years. I've built and installed some of the largest backup systems in the world. And a lot of the expertise and a lot of the products that I worked on for the last, 20, 30 years, it was all aimed at the data center. And what has happened is that, because the data center is no longer the center of data, then the techniques and the products that were aimed at that typical world no longer really apply as much as they used to, right? So, just a few statistics, right? One of the things, that we say is that 76% data, these are statistics that we get from a variety of sources, that companies are using their data more and more to make business decisions. And then also, this is a really important statistic because 2022 is coming up. Gartner feels that, based on their research, that 50% of mission-critical apps will be hosted in the public cloud by 2022. And we're certainly seeing that. I think that the pandemic really accelerated that growth. A lot of people found that there are lots of good things to talk about the cloud, and one of them was that you don't have to physically maintain a data center. And so a lot of projects that might have happened in the data center in 2020 and early part of 2021, they just basically moved those projects into the cloud. So I think that this statistic may actually be higher by that. And then, this one is, this statistic reminds me, for those of you that have been around a while, there's Dentine Gum, and Dentine Gum used to have an ad that said 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. I've heard that commercial a million times. And I always said, what's up with that 5th dentist? Does he not want them to use sugarless gum? He wants them to use gum with sugar in it? I never quite understood that. And this is the same thing with this statistic. I don't know how you could possibly not be worried about ransomware at this point. To me, it's the number one threat to data today, and specifically to having your data damaged. We've responded with technology in so many other areas. We're not worried about individual, when I started IT, we were worried about individual disk drives taking out data. We solved that with RAID and high availability and things like that. We then started worrying about fires and terrorist attacks and things taking out our data centers. We have easy solutions for those as well now, and the cloud is a big part of that. I am really worried that the average data center is not adequate, is not adequately protected against ransomware. So one of the statistics I mentioned was about driving data from, or driving value from your data protection. So the question is, we have all of this data, so are there other things that we can do simply, because historically you made backups, you put it on storage, you honestly hoped you never needed it. I have, one of the reasons why I take backups so seriously is that the first place where I cut my teeth technically was at a bank that had 12,000 employees, and we got an average of 5 requests to restore data every single day. And so I grew up in this world where, you needed to restore a lot, but most people make backups and honestly almost never actually restore from those backups. And so you have all this data and it's not adding any value. It's just an insurance policy. Is there a way that we can do that, right, to accelerate and protect cloud projects? Can we increase cyber resilience? What kinds of things? So when we look at this drawing, I'm not going to go into it too much, but this drawing depicts sort of the standard corporate data center-centric data protection system that we have grown to know and not love over the last 20, 30 years. We had issues with tape, and so we started doing things like multiplexing, and that wasn't good enough, so we started adding things like disk. This was too expensive, so we added deduplication. Disk couldn't be handed to a man in a van, and so we added deduplication plus replication. Then the cloud came into play, and so now we needed to put something in the cloud. And this picture just got more and more complex, as the cloud world evolved, right? And what a lot of people did was they responded with point products to solve a particular problem, and they end up with 3 or 4 data protection, or 5 or 6 data protection products, all that they all have to manage. It increases their TCO. Their costs are completely unpredictable, and obviously, if you have a hodgepodge backup system, you end up with data loss, non-compliance, downtime, especially if you get something like ransomware. So, our philosophy is pretty simple, and that is protect data wherever it happens to live, right? We have solutions to protect the data center, we protect the cloud, we protect SaaS services, we even protect, unlike most companies, we also have a solution for laptops and mobile devices, right? We have competitors in each of those spaces. Most of our competitors do not compete with us in all of those spaces. The idea is with an on-demand, scaling on demand, no infrastructure dependency, meaning a backup system where you don't have to install anything. You literally, and by that, any hardware, you do need to put some kind of agent, some kind of, connect us into vCenter, connect us into Hyper-V, authenticate us to your SaaS solution or to your IaaS solution like AWS. You do a simple agent or authentication installation. You don't have to install any hardware. And then you create, you use a predictable consumption model. So it's either, if you're talking, most of our workloads, it's based on gigabytes, right? So we do global source side deduplication, deduplicate all of your data into one place. It's replicated to multiple places after that. But putting all of your data in one place and then charging you based on the number of gigabytes that are stored on your behalf. If it's a SaaS service or a laptop or a mobile device, then we'll charge you per seat, right, which is essentially per user that's using the service. You get a unified experience across all of those workloads. You get one UI that you can go to that also has APIs if you'd like to use those. Data is encrypted before it ever leaves where it's being backed up from, and then it's encrypted again using AES 256 and something called envelope encryption, which allows us to securely encrypt the data, but without managing the keys ourselves. All the keys are in your hands. No one at Druva or AWS, which is where we happen to host our infrastructure, no one at any of those places has access to your data under any circumstances. You get better business continuity, better resilience, reduced TCO, right? Instead of having a whole bunch of different solutions, you get one solution. And also it's an OpEx versus CapEx play, right? So you don't have to buy stuff 3 years in advance and then hopefully use it. You pay for what you need as you need it, and you never end up paying for data you never end up paying for services that you don't use. And then you also get great SLAs and risk mitigation against things like either data theft or non-compliance against things like GDPR or CCPA, and of course responding to ransomware. This is just a visual depiction of the Druva Cloud Platform. We do all of those workloads that you see on there to the single Druva Cloud Platform that's powered by AWS. We always start with data protection. That's always the first, so backup and recovery. And to that, we add other features like data governance, helping you to ensure that you're complying with certain regulations. For example, you can specify files and emails of a certain type that shouldn't be stored in your data center or your computing environment. And we can point out if a user is in violation of that policy that you create. Then once the data is all in one place, we can also do e-discovery against that data, right? And also for data center workloads, we do disaster recovery, right? So either data center or cloud workloads, we do disaster recovery. So we can easily, within minutes, bring up your entire computing environment. Our usual thing is to do an RTO of 15 to 20 minutes, regardless of the size of your environment, and an RPO of as little as 1 hour. That's because at this time, that's as often as we're able to do a snapshot of your environment. So we offer an RPO of 1 hour and an RTO of 15 to 20 minutes for your entire environment, regardless of the size of the environment. And then also we offer advanced ransomware detection and recovery and response, and we're continuing to add more features to that. We have a really exciting feature that's coming up soon that I can't talk about now, but we have, if you're under NDA, we can talk about it. I'm really excited about the stuff that we're doing in the ransomware recovery space. And then also we offer long-term data retention, right? So if you some workloads, so an example would be a NAS. So you already have, let's say, a net app, and you like your net app, and you have a second net app. So you already have an on-prem, copy of all your data. And what you want is just sort of a doomsday copy. Well, we offer the option to send that data directly to cold storage, reducing your costs because you're saying, look, I don't plan to, this is the copy I hope I never use. So it's basically taking the place of tape in a vault somewhere. Druva is built on a cloud-native architecture, meaning that we are built to work the way the cloud works. Our system automatically scales up and scales down. Unlike some competing solutions that are basically data center solutions that have been put in VMs in the cloud, their systems can't scale up and scale down the way ours can. And so the idea is that we have the entire power of AWS at our disposal when we need it, and we can then scale back when no one's doing anything. And what that does is that reduces our cost, which we then pass that cost reduction on to you. I don't have time to go into all of that, but the idea is that we have a scalable cloud file system that stores, we have customers that have double digits of petabytes in a single account, all globally deduplicated together, and we don't have any scalability issues with that already. So we can handle your data center regardless of size, right? So forever incremental backups, I already mentioned global dedupe, and then we automatically tier your backups out to less inexpensive storage. So the idea here is a transparent business model. The curve there is basically you pay for what you consume as you consume it. If you delete data and the amount of storage stored on your behalf goes down, then your costs go down that very same month. There are very few backup solutions that do that, but that's how our pricing, as opposed to the stair-step method where you buy something, hold on to it for many years, and hope you use it. I've already mentioned this. This is the simplified and unified customer experience. One GUI, go to one place, configure all of your backups. It takes minutes to configure you to do a demo for you. And then another really cool thing about SaaS is that we do feature updates about every other week, and those feature updates are automatically rolled into the product, and all you have to do is use that service. You don't have to do anything. One of the things I often say is that the scariest thing in the world is upgrading your backup server. In our world, you don't have a backup server to upgrade. It's just a service, but it's automatically upgraded with all new features. And then finally, we talk about making your backup data work for you. The idea is that we have all of your data, so we can watch. We can watch for patterns in your data, and we can use machine learning to detect when you have been infected with ransomware. We can then immediately notify you, pause the backups, and then with one click bring you back to and recover you back to the world before you were attacked by ransomware. And again, we've got some other exciting solutions coming out. There are several stories of customers that we have here. This is about Hope Global that they're saying that they save 75% administrative time with Druva. That's a huge thing. Basically, think about all of the things that I spent my entire career, like 25 years, helping customers retweak their backup systems to be, higher performance and all of that, and more resilient. All of that stuff that you do in the back end, all of that hard work is automatically done for you. So really all you have to do is configure the backups and then let them run, right? A lot of stats here, right? 165 petabytes of data under management, and continue to grow 50% year over year in the data that we're managing. We're in 14 global regions, and we do, doing over 2 billion backups a year. A lot of awards and industry recognition. And then just, finally here again, that Druva is 100% SaaS, right? And it is a service that you consume just like something like Salesforce, and you simply pay for how much you're using. Transparent pricing, and zero trust architecture. You hold all of the power and all of the keys, and then you get a unified experience across the platform. So we have a free trial that you can use. Just go to druva.com/free-trial, and there's a TCO calculator, and feel free to get in touch with us. And with that, I think I'm going to pass things back over for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Curtis. We do have some reader questions that have come in. Our first question is, how can Druva help me protect against ransomware?
Yeah, so I mentioned part of that already, that because we are watching your data and we see all of it in one place, we can notice when your data matches a certain pattern. A perfect example is Curtis changes 2 or 3 files a day, and then suddenly he changes 500 files. Curtis didn't get very busy. Curtis got ransomware, right? That's just one example. So we can notice that, notify you, stop the backups of that account or that laptop. And early notification of a ransomware attack is important, because once you get notified, you can stop further, spread of that virus, right? But the other is that we can very quickly restore your entire environment in the cloud. As I mentioned, 15 to 20 minutes to restore your entire VMware world inside the cloud with literally a single button, right? There's a lot of configuration up front, and we recover it into an Amazon virtual private cloud of your choosing.
Wonderful, thank you. Looks like we have time to sneak in one last question, or kind of a twofer actually. How is Druva licensed, and what about egress charges?
That's one concern that some people have with cloud. So Druva, I think I mentioned this already. We do for data center workloads, we price per gigabyte. For SaaS and like endpoint workloads like laptops and mobile devices, we price per seat. And what was the second part of the question? It was how is it licensed and
what about egress charges?
Oh, yeah, egress charges. Because we run in the cloud, some competing solutions, they're not a true service. What they run their software in your Amazon or Azure account. When you do that, whenever you do a restore, you are going to get egress charges from your cloud provider because they don't like you to take data out of the cloud, right? So when you do a restore and you're moving data from the cloud provider to your data center, you will pay egress charges. Our software runs in our account, right? So all you see is a web browser. Again, if you used Office 365, if you use Salesforce, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a web browser. You just use our UI. And when you do a restore, there are technically egress charges, but they're our problem, not yours, right? And it's all included in the pricing. You pay literally either a price per user or a price per gigabyte when it's stored in the cloud. So it's very transparent and very predictable.
Which is so nice. Transparency is huge. That's awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. We are actually out of time, but if we didn't get to your question, go ahead and, folks, you can still pop them in the audience to the Q&A box, and we can go ahead and pass those to Curtis later. So you're not quite out of time yet, but in the questions that have come in, Curtis will pass those your way a little bit later today. And now it is my honor to announce the first winner of our GoPro. So let me pull that up as our team pulled it for us. And our first winner of the GoPro is Scott Mapes of Children's Hospital of Minnesota. So our team will get in contact with you so that you can claim your prize. But we're so excited that you were able to win. And with that, I am thrilled to announce our second speaker, Gene Torres, Technology Evangelist at Zerto. Gene is here with us today and has also provided us his presentation. He is available to answer all your questions over the next 20 minutes, so please go ahead and submit those right in the Q&A box, and we'll get right back to you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our session today at Redmond Mag. The focus of our session today will be continuous data protection with Zerto and disaster recovery as a service by Island. I'll cover the agenda shortly, but before we do that, to cover some of the housekeeping items, this is a recorded presentation that will be available on demand afterwards. However, I will be available to answer any of your questions in the chat throughout the session. So with that, my name is Gene Torres, and I'm a technology evangelist at Zerto. My contact information is here as well, should you have any questions following our session. Today I'll introduce you to Zerto and the value we bring to the enterprise. We'll talk about some of the challenges of disaster recovery and how Zerto's continuous data protection can solve for challenges without prolonged disruption to your business. We'll cover RTOs and RPOs in terms of data loss and recovery time objectives. We'll then take a look at the simplicity of our built-in orchestration and automation. And finally, how together Island and Zerto can provide you with a simplified business continuity strategy through Island's secure disaster recovery as a service. So Zerto was founded in 2009 and first shipped product and debuted in 2011 at VMworld, where we received the Best of Show award. With the vision of enabling an uninterrupted world for all technology users, consumers, and businesses, Zerto has grown alongside almost 10,000 customers in 80 countries and over 1,500 strategic partners who share in this vision. We started by supporting the DR strategies of our customers as they went on that virtualization journey for the first time, and have since expanded right beside them to support their cloud journey for DR and data protection, migration, and now as they transform into a world of next-generation modern applications run on Kubernetes and software as a service platforms. And today, While we can help protect, test, move, and recover for any number of use cases, we're going to focus in on some of the challenges of disaster recovery and how Zerto can help you overcome those challenges, and also how we can take it a step further with our partner Island to simplify your business continuity strategy even more through their managed disaster recovery as a service. Now, you may be attending today's session because you've either heard of some of the challenges that have affected businesses around the world, or you're looking to beef up your DR strategy, yet simplify it. But before we get deeper into the different challenges organizations face when it comes to disaster recovery, let's take a look at 3 of the top of mind areas that we see today. First one, and I'll start on the right here, is ransomware. We're hearing through multiple outlets, and it seems like on a more frequent basis that ransomware is affecting more organizations out there, and over time the number of attacks and severity have been growing and will continue to do so. Regardless of the technology, whether it's backup or disaster recovery, when it comes to ransomware, the bottom line is being able to recover from it and come out on top in the least amount of time and without immense amounts of data loss. The next one is acceleration of cloud adoption. So as more businesses are adopting various services or solutions in the cloud today, we still need to protect our data out in the cloud, whether it's being backed up on a regular basis or continuously protected to guarantee little to no data loss and a quick recovery strategy. Finally, as we continue to leverage more data to open the business up to new markets, transform to be better serving for our customers, and bring more efficiencies, we need to remember that data continues to grow, and so as that data grows and becomes more valuable, we also need a better way to protect and recover it to meet our needs for continuous availability. We're seeing more and more that protection needs to be continuous, and tolerance for downtime from every aspect of the business, from customers all the way to stakeholders, is becoming less each day. And data loss, in most cases up to 24 hours worth, is just not acceptable. Recently, we sponsored a survey with the IDC titled The State of Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Readiness of 2021, and from the DR perspective, we're seeing that even modern organizations are still working toward a mature DR strategy. And there are many different challenges out there. However, the top 3 challenges are clear here. IT personnel knowledge about disaster recovery planning, time and resource availability, and recovery time are a bottleneck for organizations. So that said, if we think about it, to address the knowledge gap or skill gap, we need more simplicity and repeatability in what we're doing. Technologies designed to provide disaster recovery can range anywhere from simple to very complex, including dependencies that are or maybe new that they would have to learn in addition to the core DR technology, further increasing the strain on personnel. We've heard a lot about digital transformation and the benefits of innovating. However, without additional personnel, IT organizations are getting stretched thin as priorities fight for their time and attention. And this all has a waterfall effect when it comes to recovery time, because DR testing is now a challenge, less people are available, and runbooks may be falling out of date. So we need to think of simpler, more efficient ways of approaching these challenges. First of all, let's take a look at how Zerto helps address these challenges and can greatly simplify your DR strategy. So Zerto is the market leader when it comes to simplification of protecting, testing, moving, and recovering your data. Whereas in many environments today, we still see multiple technology solutions bolted together to provide disparate tools for backup, replication, orchestration, reporting, and testing. The Zerto platform was designed to address all these challenges in a single, simple, and scalable platform built for the enterprise, but simple enough to adopt in even the smallest of environments. We're the leader in minimizing data loss, or RPO, recovery point objectives, as well as the leader in minimizing the time it takes to resume business following a disruption. That's RTO, that's a recovery time objective, with much more when it comes to simplifying runbooks and ensuring a sound testing strategy that enables you to quickly test and test often without disruption to production systems. The continuous data protection I've been alluding to is made possible with Zerto's block-level replication. This is near-synchronous replication that's always on, so you're getting the best of both synchronous and asynchronous approaches without the potential of data corruption that can instantly be replicated through synchronous technologies. Because we sit at the virtualization layer or the hypervisor layer, we can provide a software-only solution that's completely independent of the underlying hardware and infrastructure, including storage, giving you the most flexibility in mixing and matching infrastructure to meet your needs without locking you into a single hardware or storage vendor's platform. This is the very reason why Zerto works very well across hypervisors, clouds, and platforms. You are completely in control in terms of choice to do what's best for your business, while Zerto effortlessly runs in the background without any impact to production workloads. And remember, once you're protecting workloads with Zerto, that protection is completely hands-off for you. So there are no challenges when it comes to backup windows or changing schedules. No management of snapshot chains or agents. You simply set it up, replicate, and it stays on to keep you protected. And part of what makes continuous data protection so powerful is the unique journaling capabilities we have. Our journal tracks every single change made in your application or on your servers and logs these as checkpoints every 5 to 10 seconds, even when you have hundreds or thousands of servers. The journal can store data for as little as 1 hour or out to 30 days, offering you unmatched granularity when it comes to recovery, whether it's an entire virtual data center, an entire application, or a single file. Whenever needed, you can simply rewind to a point in time and recover with consistency across protected workloads to that exact point in time. Now, for longer-term retention requirements that go beyond 30 days, we also support long-term retention repositories of many types, including cloud storage, which can be immutable, auto-tiered as data ages, and very cost-efficient without the hassle of having to refresh hardware at intervals. This data can then be protected for as long as you are required to keep copies for compliance or regulation. And regardless of recovering data from the short-term or long-term, the workflows are all the same and can be performed in as little as 4 clicks. So here's a peek into what the journal looks like when you're recovering from our graphical user interface. And as you can see, we've got timestamps on these checkpoints that are literally seconds apart from each other. On average, within an hour, you can expect to see about 1,500 to 1,600 checkpoints you can recover from. So it's very powerful and it's very granular. All right, so I mentioned consistency across workloads in an application that you protect with Zerto. So as opposed to restoring an application that may be multiple servers one by one with timestamps all over the place, with Zerto you can recover that application with consistency across all the disks, across all the workloads, and down to the second. So everything that you restore or recover can be recovered as a single entity rather than a collection of disparate systems. So let's see what that looks like in action. So just to kind of set the stage here, I've got an environment with 2 sites, and my production site or my protected site has had an application outage. And in this example, it's Exchange. So Exchange is down in production. I'm logged in right now to my recovery site, and I just go to failover. I select live. I'm going to choose my Exchange application. I'm just going to hit next here. I'm going to select a checkpoint to recover from. You can do the latest checkpoint, but I do want to pick a point in time. I'm going to click OK here, next, and then I'll start the failover. And that's as simple as it is. Once it starts, your environment for that application will automatically get registered in your vCenter or your System Center Virtual Machine Manager on your recovery site. And through the orchestration that you've set up when you created this virtual protection group, like IP address changes, boot ordering, what host or cluster to put things on, what network to put it on, what storage to put it on, etc. All it takes is really those clicks and the start failover for things to happen and for you to be recovered. There is a commit phase. So if you're looking here again, when we get to the point where it's selecting our checkpoint, to the right there's a commit policy. This says auto commit in 60 minutes. So you can actually give it 60 minutes for your team to go in and double check and validate everything works, and then Zerto will auto commit it after 60 minutes, or you can manually commit it with no timeout, so you can have even longer periods of testing before committing to that change. But that's it. It's very simple, and everything is taken care of in terms of getting that workload back up and running. All right. So now that we're familiar with Zerto and the capabilities, and you have an idea of how we meet the challenges of DR planning and execution, let's switch gears and look a little bit more into some of the reasoning behind organizations choosing to go with a managed service provider like ILAN for their disaster recovery as a service. Right, so this time we've got data from Gartner, and in this survey we're looking at what's motivating businesses to approach DR with a provider as opposed to building their own strategy or DR data center. We're seeing here that where there was an IT personnel availability or knowledge gap, and there's time shortage, that same theme is one driver for selecting a managed service provider as a DR strategy. So in doing so, you're also going to get better recovery time objectives and minimal data loss, therefore beating those challenges that we encountered earlier on. You're going to avoid the upfront capital costs that are associated with building out a data center for recovery, and you can even meet compliance requirements much quicker than doing it yourself. And there's also an avoidance side of things when it comes to selecting a DRaaS provider as opposed to doing it yourself. You're going to avoid the costs of refreshing hardware and storage used for disaster recovery, which has been a challenge for many organizations, often enough of a challenge that they can decide to greatly reduce their DR site footprint based on the cost, and they may introduce more risk in recoverability by only focusing on a few key critical applications and not looking at a holistic solution, which then continues to put them at risk because then they'll find a dependency along the way and need to accommodate it for it. So it's this unending battle, right? Do I go and I keep investing in this with the frequency or lack of frequency of disruption, or do I look for something better, a better strategy that is a lot nicer to my pocketbook and my budget, that I can, I don't have to worry about all the underlying technologies and infrastructure and refreshing and, things like that. Right, so additional benefits can be seen here as well. You're going to have a reduction in capital costs of infrastructure, and we kind of touched on that a little in the previous slide. You're going to eliminate maintenance costs as well. You'll reduce the cost of administration, especially if you're already working with limited personnel. Just like the public cloud infrastructure as a service, you gain access to on-demand resources that are available to meet your business requirements, giving you near unlimited scalability. So remember when we were talking about organizations going in the opposite direction and minimizing their DR site footprint because of the costs and management associated with it, this kind of gives you the other side of that, where if you need to scale, there will be resources to allow you to do that pretty gracefully, and pretty near unlimited scalability there, and much more. You get much more out of it as well, including but not limited to a mature BCDR strategy, almost overnight, if you will. And here's where Island comes in. Island Cloud is a global platform that combines high-performing mission-critical infrastructure, advanced management software, and expert migration services to deliver a simple, secure, and enterprise-class transformation experience for a multitude of use cases, including data protection and disaster recovery. In fact, they have been recognized as Zerto's Cloud Partner of the Year for 4 years, and so they are very well-versed in the disaster recovery needs of our customers. Island delivers fully integrated cloud services designed for application performance and recovery with flexible management options and predictable pricing. So again, you're going to get that cloud model, that consumption model, but at a more predictable cost. And we'll see, what that process looks like. So Island's data centers are designed with leading enterprise solutions to meet mission-critical service levels, simplified and integrated management through a single console to manage your applications and recovery services, again, integrated with leading software solution providers like Zerto. They also meet a wide range of stringent security, encryption, and geographic compliance requirements. Again, all of this with predictable pricing and global support, including 24/7 premium support with all services signed on for. So each member of their team is certified by industry-leading vendors such as VMware, Cisco, Zerto, and more to ensure you're getting the best experience and support and solutions. So when it comes to planning your DR solution with Island, their cloud services team also assists in the setup and initial failover testing of your solution to ensure that this is going to work, right? And ensure your team is confident in your ability to recover. Again, addressing many of the challenges that organizations are up against when it comes to DR planning, testing, and recovery alongside transformation initiatives. They also go the extra mile and provide every DR customer with direct access to their Level 2 certified support technicians by phone, email, ticketing system, for peace of mind that there's always a human on the other end that is there for you when you need them. When it comes to adopting DR as a service, the approach doesn't have to be everything all at once. And Island knows this. They're focused on customer success and elevating your experience when it comes to understanding your business requirements to build a comprehensive, resilient solution that provides simplicity through their leading recovery platform and managed services. Their deep onboarding services encompass everything from initial sizing to ongoing management and growth. And ultimately meeting the needs when it comes to a globally trusted platform for performance and security with clear and predictable pricing with included premium support. With over 25 years of delivering IT services, they're known for having 100% availability SLAs, with 12 plus years of cloud and DR expertise in 10 global cloud regions, also meeting your needs to be regionally separated from your primary data center of operations to make sure you're not going to fall victim to a regional outage, even if you are separated within the same region. So again, with Zerto and iland together, we can overcome the challenges faced with DR, enable your staff to reclaim time and focus toward your business strategy as you transform through simplicity and managed services. So for more information about iland, you can get in touch with them in many ways. And here are a few to get you started. The first is going to be their Success Center at success.iland.com, which will help you learn more about all of their industry-leading services and offerings. They're also responsive to product feedback. So if you have a suggestion to enhance a product, once you check it out, you can simply email them at ideas@iland.com, which goes into their system, and their product teams will get a hold of it. Or you can visit their blog to even hear more about the latest on thought leadership topics for all things related to cloud from their very own team of experts and technologists. And then to learn more about Zerto, more use cases, success stories from customers, feel free to visit us at zerto.com. And finally, if you're interested in trying Zerto out for yourself to see what the experience is like, visit our hands-on labs to take our leading continuous data protection solution for a spin. No infrastructure is going to be required on your part. It's as simple as clicking on the lab you want to test or try out, clicking submit, and the lab will be automatically brought up for you. It is a live lab. You'll get an email once it's ready, and then you'll have several hours to take the lab, which is guided, by the way. So if anyone's familiar with like the VMware hands-on labs, it's very similar. You get scenarios and test cases, and it tells you where to go, step by step what to do. So it's very simple, and it's a great way to experience Zerto firsthand. And with that, I hope you were able to get your questions answered today. And on behalf of Zerto and iland, I'd like to thank you for spending your time with us. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, Gene. Just as a reminder, everyone, if you have any questions for Gene, go ahead and get those submitted in the Q&A box now, and he will respond to you via the console. Gene, thank you so much for being here today. With that, we're excited to move on to our third speaker for today. Joining us now is Eric Crucy, Senior Solutions Engineer at AvePoint. Eric, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Eric Cruzy, and I am a Senior Solution Engineer here at AvePoint. And today I'll be walking you through AvePoint's approach to backing up and protecting Microsoft 365 data. And we'll be focusing specifically on modern approaches and strategies to data protection and how you can help ensure that you are getting the highest level of protection of your organization's data with minimal effort and oversight on your part. Now, we're logged into the AvePoint cloud platform called AvePoint Online Services here, which hosts many different solutions, not just cloud backup for Microsoft 365, which we will be focusing on today. It's important to note that this platform is fully hosted within Azure. So from a security standpoint and a performance standpoint, you get some added benefits knowing that all of your data remains within the Microsoft ecosystem, and it never leaves the Azure cloud platform. Now, when we talk about protecting your data, we give our customers and you the ability to bring your own Azure Key Vault encryption profile. And this is another added measure to help ensure that your data cannot be accessed even in the event of a ransomware attack or malware event. Now, if we go into the solution itself, we'll show you how you can set up the data protection so that you can set it, forget it, and ensure that all your data is being protected. Now, we give our customers the ability to choose a backup schedule. Since this is a backup as a service, you can configure which data you want to protect. Maybe it's the entire tenant or it's specific, in this case, OneDrives. You get the ability to choose what you want to protect and have backed up. We also give you the ability to choose your backup frequency. So up to 4 times per day, we'll back up the data that you specify. And all of the incremental changes that happen since the last backup will automatically be included in the subsequent backup. So here we can see the different backups that take place. Again, any changes and additions that take place will be automatically picked up. Now, when we go to restoring, so if we go to our left-hand navigation over here, we can restore from any one of these workloads. So it's simply a matter of choosing the data that you want to specify. Very frequently, what we see from organizations is the ability to not just back up the data, but also back up some of that contextual data, which can sometimes be just as important to the business as the individual files themselves. So what are we talking about there? So metadata, permissions, any other external sharing, right, that you may have on a file, that can be optionally restored or left behind. So let's go into SharePoint and let's see an example of this. I have a couple different ways of identifying the data that I want to restore. I can enter in a keyword search and search by a specific site collection, or I can search by, for example, an object metadata. So if I know the name and who it was created by, or if I'm looking for a file that was modified on a certain date, I can enter that in here. The other way that which a lot of our customers will identify the data that they want to restore is actually by going by a object or a time-based restore to pull out those objects. So if I go to a recovery point of May 31st at 2:51 a.m., I can see the entire M365 tenant as it existed at that particular recovery point. Now, if I want to go ahead and actually drill into the data, I do have the option of restoring at the entire site collection, or I can drill down into that content and find what I'm looking to restore. You'll notice that we give you the ability to back up individual subsites. We're backing up the apps. We're backing up the system lists and libraries. So keeping that full fidelity of the data during the backup and restore processes. Now, for a lot of organizations, it's not just the ability to restore the files themselves that's important, but it's also the ability to go ahead and come in here and choose to restore permissions or pages or again, those external permissions that we were talking about previously. So if I want to go ahead and restore this document library, site collection documents, notice that I have the ability to restore the content and the permissions, or the permissions only. And then I also have the ability to restore to its original location. Let's say it was accidentally deleted. Let's say the retention settings, right, were accidentally changed by a admin in the M365 Admin Center. I can go ahead and restore that data back, or I can choose to restore to another location if I want to, let's say, review the content prior to moving it to its ultimate destination. We also give you the ability to restore the last X number of versions or the latest version only, really depending on if, let's say, you're restoring for a business user and they have an idea of if it's, the latest version, or if they're not sure, right, we can give them the last 20 versions or 10 versions, whatever it may be. You may also want to restore the external permissions as well if it's a, collaboration area where you do have a lot of external access being granted. And this will prevent your business users from having to go in and re-add those permissions later on after we do the restore. So we can handle that for you as an option in your restore settings. Now that's on the SharePoint side. Let's look at some of the other more advanced workloads or newer workloads within the M365 suite. So let's go ahead now and go into Teams, and we'll go ahead and do another time-based restore, and let's go back to April, right? So as far back as you want to go, I can see the 4 backups that took place on that particular day, and I can pick my recovery point. So what we're looking at here are individual teams at this particular recovery point. So I can see all the teams that were in my tenant as they were on April 13th at 5:54 p.m. local time. Now, I can restore at a team level here. So I can restore the entire team, or again, I can drill into that data and choose the underlying data that I want to restore. Notice here that we have the ability to restore individual channels. We can restore the group conversations. We can restore the meetings, the planner, the underlying SharePoint site, or the entire site itself. So all of these different elements are being backed up and protected, including the membership of the team. If we go and drill into channels, we can see here that we are also backing up the private channels, which are indicated here by the lock icon. So I can restore a private channel, which would include the permissions as well as the underlying site collection. Or I can actually drill into that private channel and choose specific files or folders that I want to restore. So for this particular file, again, we can restore the content and the permissions only. We can restore in place and out of place, right? The same options that we had for the SharePoint Online restore. If we want to go back up and we want to restore, let's say, an individual planner, I can actually come in here and restore a planner bucket or even individual plans in case one of those was deleted and wiped away. So this is a comprehensive backup of all of those different components within your team and the underlying SharePoint data. From a security perspective, and for organizations that do need to divide up the administration of that data, we give you the ability to set up role-based access. So an example of this may be if I wanted to grant, let's say we had a US-based business and I wanted to give only those US admins the ability to restore that data, I can actually go in and choose a specific scope. So let's say I wanted to give our US admins the ability to only restore sites and workspaces, or in this case, SharePoint sites that fall under the United States geography. I can go ahead and set up that role-based access. So being able to divide this out, some of the organizations that we work with will divide it by workload. So maybe you have an Exchange team that should only be able to restore the Exchange data. You have a SharePoint team and a OneDrive team that should just restore that respective data. So however you would like to divide up that ability to do restores, we give you that capability. Now, this is also helpful in trimming down the permissions if you want to protect against ransomware and malware. So let's say someone's credentials are compromised, we can provide a lower level of access so that they cannot make larger scale changes to your backup settings and prevent your business from being able to recover your data. So keep that in mind, that we give you that flexibility to set up those controls and those permissions however you see fit organizationally. We also give you the ability to manage the data within your backups. So if you need to, for legal reasons, actually remove some of the data from your backups, we give you that capability as well. We also give you the ability to measure the data that you are protecting, give you an idea of what is taking up your backup data. So we can see here that OneDrive for Business is far and away the largest amount of data that we are backing up from a M365 workload perspective. We give you that ability and insight to see that data and see what it is you're protecting and actually drill into that data to see how that is dispersed and segregated across your tenant. So one of the ways in which we empower our customers to get insights into what it is they're protecting and what it is that they need to make adjustments to from a storage perspective. So that is the cloud backup for M365 solution that AvePoint provides to help organizations protect their Microsoft 365 data. For any other questions or topics that you would like to know, please feel free to reach out with questions. We'll be happy to answer any of those that have come up as a result of this session. So thank you very much. And again, feel free to send us over your questions now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eric. We do have time for a few audience questions, so let's go ahead and do those while our team is working on drawing the name of the second winner of our next GoPro. Okay, so let's open these questions up. Okay, lots of good ones. Our first question for you, Eric, if we have documents that we destroyed because the end of the life reached, and then we realized that applied the wrong retention, can we recover those documents?
Yeah, great question. So if you do have files that were deleted, disposed due to policies, you do have the option to submit a ticket to Microsoft and get that restored, typically within a 2-week period of time. Keep in mind, though, that you will have some complexity to that, especially if the files are scattered across different OneDrive, SharePoint sites, and your retention policy was reaching right into many different areas. That could be a very complex restoration because you'll have to do restores for each specific site collection.
Definitely. Okay, and then one of the questions, before I get to our next audience question, just a question that I love to ask, how can the audience get a hold of your product or go through a trial? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's very easy. You can actually just go to avpoint.com and take a look at our cloud backup for M365 page, and right from there you can start a free trial. And there's actually a free trial button on the upper right-hand corner of our website. So very easy to start a trial, and certainly encourage you to do so if you're looking to get some hands-on experience with some cloud backup solutions.
Oh, that's huge. Thanks for making it so easy on us. That's great. Perfect. Okay, so next question here we have is, does MS retention policies allow customers to retain all data for a named period of time?
Yes, that is certainly supported. So you can do retention policies to make sure that the data is not deleted or purged. Depending on how the retention policy is set up, typically that data will remain within the site that it was created in or collaborated on. So if that file is uploaded to a particular site, you have a retention policy. Many times that data will be moved to a retention library. Something to keep in mind about that is that file, even though it's under a retention period, will count against your storage quota with Microsoft. So certainly something to keep in mind as your tenant grows and as more and more files start reaching that limit.
Oh, most definitely. Okay, good, perfect. Thank you. And then finally, just to close us out before we jump into our winner of the GoPro, personally, what is just your favorite feature on the product or best part about it in your personal opinion?
Yeah, we've actually rolled out some new functionality to proactively identify, analyze, and resolve issues, whether it's on the backup or restore side, proactively without our customers having to submit tickets. So really aligning ourselves more into that backup as a service and minimizing really the amount of time that you need to spend on that administration of our solution. So I think that's really one of the areas that we are focusing on, is being able to proactively ensure no matter what's going on in your tenant, no matter the complexity, we're going to be proactively in ensuring that all of your backups are running smoothly and protecting all that data according to your SLAs.
Oh, that's huge. Easily understandable for a favorite feature. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We are out of time, but if folks, if you didn't get your question asked, feel free to continue to pop those in the audience console. We will pass those over to Eric. But thank you, Eric, so much for spending some time with us. It was really helpful. And with that,
absolutely.
Let's go ahead
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, of course. And now it's time to announce the winner of our next GoPro. So the winner is Joseph Jules from AlMed. So congratulations, Joseph, and we'll contact you shortly so you can go ahead and claim your prize. Wonderful. And as you can see, thank you everyone for staying on the line with us. We have our next presentation with Suhas Nayak. He's the head of product marketing over at Clumio. So thank you so much for being here, Suhas. With that, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Olivia. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Suhas Nayak at Clumio, and it's really great to have this opportunity to talk to each one of you. And continuing with the theme of our day's discussion today, I'll be talking to you about the importance of having a modern and, most importantly, a secure data protection solution for all your data in the cloud. And so what we've found through our discussions with customers as well as several industry analysts is that the number one reason why people are looking for a secure backup solution is ransomware, right? And so that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I'm sure you guys are hearing about ransomware on a regular basis, if not on a daily basis, and that's how prevalent it is. And so I'm just sharing some stats here to to highlight that point. And just in the last 10 months, almost 140 local governments, police stations, schools, and hospitals have been held hostage by ransomware attacks. And it's predicted that by end of this year, a new organization will fall victim to such an attack every 11 seconds. So it's pretty prevalent, and no one is safe from ransomware. So there, and that's why our customers and everyone that we talk about who is having data in their cloud, this is the number one reason why they want to secure their data from, right? And one of the ways, as you heard some of our earlier presenters today, is to protect oneself from such an attack is to have a secure or valid backup. So because backups are your last line of defense, let's say you have to be prepared that, hey, you will be attacked by ransomware. So what do you do, right? So if you have a valid, secure copy of backup, you can quickly recover from it. But having said that, not all backups are equal or are sufficient to protect you from ransomware. And the reason being is that the hackers are pretty sophisticated in their attacks. They spend, once they enter your account or your domain, for example, they spend a lot of time on your network, in your environment. I mean, days or even months. On an average, they spend over 200 days before they actually encrypt your primary data and, hold your data hostage and ask for that ransom, right? So what they're doing when they're spending all this amount of time on your network is actually looking for those backup copies, right? So that they can even find those and encrypt them, and so that way you don't have an easy, good way to recover from this attack, right? So that's why we want to highlight that not all backups are equal or sufficient to protect you from such an attack and have a nice way from recovering from such an attack. And so what I'll do is I'll show a quick example on why that's the case. And I'll take an example of how, let's say, data is protected in AWS using the native snapshot manager that you have available. So, for example, let's say you bring up an app in EC2, for example, in your account. And as soon as you bring it up, you will be provided with an option or a question asking, hey, do you want to protect the data of this particular app and that you just, loaded into EC2? And you'll say yes. And what happens is basically the snapshot manager in AWS starts creating snapshots of the data. In EC2, for example, it could be RDS as well. And this is great from an operational recovery point of view, so that if you accidentally delete the data or, something goes wrong, you can go back to one of these snapshots and recover your data and get back up and running, right? So this is great for operational recovery. Having said that, if you remember, if it's a ransomware attack, the hackers are going to actually hunt for these snapshots in your account, right? And it's really easy to identify snapshots in AWS. So if they have access to your account, they also have access to all these snapshots that are created in account, and they're going to encrypt that, and then you won't have a valid snapshot or a backup copy to recover from such an attack. That's one. The other challenge here is that with snapshots or in-account snapshots, you don't get indexing or cataloging. And what I mean by that is if you want to, let's say, go recover a specific file from, say, EDS or recover a particular table from an RDS database, the only option for you to do that is to restore the entire EC2 or RDS instance from this particular snapshot, and then go search and pick that particular specific file or record that you want to recover. So recovery is extremely slow and complex as well with a snapshot-based data protection solution. So those are the other challenges. Now, what you could do is you could basically say that, okay, to protect my snapshots from an attack, such as from a ransomware attack, I can write a script and duplicate my snapshots into another account. And so that's like you're trying to provide a layer of security to protect yourself from ransomware. But now what happens is that, it adds a lot more complexity. You have to do this manually via scripts. There are egress charges. And oh, by the way, now you are replicating and duplicating the number of snapshots in your environment, right? So your costs double up as well. And at the end of the day, this is still not a true air gap protection, meaning these two accounts are still within, let's say, the purview or the credentials of your admin who's managing your backups. And so it's not really, I would say, storing your backups outside the security sphere or domain of the primary data, right? So yeah, you're adding some level of security, but it's still not the true air gap protection that you want. And you're also doubling up your costs and adding a ton of complexity. So because of these reasons, we truly believe that while there are a ton of benefits to go adopt and embrace the public cloud, data protection has several gaps. As highlighted on the previous slide, the security is insufficient. The recovery and the restore process is slow. So if you want to really go get back up to business, anytime there is an attack, it's going to take a lot of time. And by the way, depending upon your implementation, it could be extremely expensive as well. There could be a lot of wasted expense which you could get rid of with the right solution. So now that I've shown why there are gaps in data protection if you use, let's say, snapshot or legacy solutions to protect your data, I now want to show how we do and solve those problems with Clumio, right? So we do provide the same in-account snapshot management. So if you want just to have snapshots, some of them in your account to quickly recover from an operational error, we manage those in-account snapshots for you as well, and we provide that feature for free. On top of that, what we do is if you want to protect your data using Clumio, we ingest that data from your account across multiple accounts, multiple regions, and we move that into a Clumio service to provide that air gap protection from your primary accounts. So basically, there's a clear security sphere and domain separation between this Clumio service that's running in AWS and each one of your AWS accounts. So that's how we are providing that air gap protection, which you heard earlier in the day. I think it was Scott who was mentioning it's critical and important that you have that. So that's how we are providing this air gap protection. Additionally, once we have your backup copy in our service, we do indexing and cataloging. And what that helps us is with providing you with global search. You can browse a particular file across all the different backups and versions in our service. For example, let's say, hey, I'm about to present this presentation to you and I lose the file. I can quickly go to my calendar view and pick a version of this file from one of the snapshots and download it. I don't have to restore an entire EC2 instance, for example, and then search for it. So we are making the entire recovery process simpler and faster as well. And then additionally, there's no duplication or replication of snapshots, as you can see from this particular slide here. So we've been able to provide up to 50% of cost savings or lower TCO for our customers once they've started backing up their data with Clumio, right? So, and in addition to having the air gap protection, I want to highlight that, yes, having secure backups is important, but it's equally important, if not more, for you to have a fast and rapid recovery method as well. And with Clumio, because of all the indexing and cataloging that you're doing, as I've mentioned, you can do granular recovery, meaning you can go pick a particular file in your EBS volume and either download it to your system or even email it in a secure manner to the person that's asking for that particular copy. Let's say you have an audit. You have to prove that you are compliant and meeting all your requirements and want to, as part of the process as well, recover certain files. You can do that very quickly, just a couple of clicks, versus taking hours to do that same operation using snapshot management in AWS. And it's not just files. You can even directly query databases in RDS using SQL and either retrieve a table or even a specific entry within a table. We even provide file system browse capability, so you can get a logical view of your entire directory and then pick a particular file or record that you want to retrieve. So very important, this functionality, so that anytime you have an issue where you have to retrieve data, it's super simple, and you can just get that specific piece of information rather than trying to restore the entire instance, which can be time-consuming and expensive as well. And then rapid restore is also important, and what I mean by that is how quickly can you actually get the data back. And Clumio is 100% built natively in AWS, so we have access to a ton of compute resources. For example, we can spin a ton of Lambda functions in parallel the moment we are ready to do the transfer of the data into your account. So both, with granular as well as rapid restore capabilities, we bring down your recovery times from hours to minutes, and that's what our customers have been benefiting from as well. So air gap plus the faster recovery, and then it's equally important to make sure that whichever solution you're using is built with a security-first mindset. And what I mean by that is our Clumio platform has gone through rigorous testing for all the latest and greatest certifications, all the way from ISO to PCI, DSS, HIPAA, and SOC 2, and we keep doing these testing and penetration testing on a regular basis to make sure that the platform is hardened. The backup copies, by the way, which are air gap, we add a couple of other layers to protect it on top of it. One, those backup copies are immutable. And what I mean by that is if somehow, let's say, the hackers do get access to those backup copies, they can't encrypt it, they can't modify it. And so they are immutable. And on top of that, there isn't a simple delete button or option to delete those copies as well. You have to go through multiple levels of authentication, multiple levels of users within your organizations to go delete a backup copy. So with the air gap, immutable storage, and not having a simple delete option, you're just making it harder and harder for someone to go compromise your backup copy. Then there was a good point that was highlighted in one of the previous sessions as well, is it's important to have the option to encrypt your backup data using your own keys. So all the data at rest as well as in transit is encrypted by Clumio, and you have the option to bring your own keys to encrypt that data as well. So all in all, I would say it's a platform that's built with security first from a design point of view, and providing you with all the features that you would want to ensure that your data is secure, right? So to summarize, you want to protect your data in the cloud. The legacy bad data protection solutions, as well as the native snapshot-based data protections, they fall short. There are a lot of gaps. So you want a modern, new data protection solution that makes it super simple to bring in your, let's say, your AWS environments into the platform, and you can start protecting your assets like in less than 15 minutes. And you can try that. On my last slide, there are details on how you can do that. So that's one. It should be super simple. Just a few clicks and you start protecting your data, let's say in AWS. Second, recovery is equally important. As I said, I want to stress that anytime there's an attack, you want to be back up in business really quickly with a valid copy of backup data. So being able to do flexible and granular restores is really important. Being able to, once you find that record that you want to retrieve, or an entire instance, for example, you should be now able to rapidly restore that data as well. So having a platform or a solution that has innovations built in to do that rapid recovery is super important. And as I said, with Clumio, we have infinite scale just by natively being built in AWS, and we can do that extremely fast. And last but not the least, having this platform that's built with a security-first mindset that makes it extremely hard for anyone to break into the backup copies and compromise it. So with all those things built into our platform, our mission is to deliver a data protection as a service for the public cloud that's a lot more secure. There's air gap, and there's a lot of hardening done at the platform level to make sure that your data is secure. If we provide 10x, or actually even more than 10x faster restore times, we have customers that were taking almost 4 hours to restore their data, and now they can do that in 2 to 4 minutes. We have public case studies on our website that have these metrics, so I would encourage you to go have a look at those public case studies as well with this specific data. And just a much simpler experience, whether it's in terms of starting to protect your AWS assets all the way to finding the data and recovering it. It's a much simpler experience versus, let's say, using native snapshot management with a bunch of manual scripts to put together a holistic data protection solution. And by the way, last but not the least, you get all these benefits at a much lower TCO. Again, tons of public references and case studies where we've highlighted how our existing customers have been able to reduce their TCO significantly by backing up their data into Clumio. So yeah, and then, what's better than actually testing it out yourself, right? So I would highly encourage you to go give us a test drive. I have the link on my slide, but you can, even if you just go to Clumio.com, there will be a button right at the top which will say, hey, try it for free. And they're giving $200 worth of free credits. So you don't have to pay anything to bring in some of your AWS assets, for example, into Clumio and start protecting it. It takes less than 15 minutes. And you can firsthand experience all the fast recovery as well as the ultimate security we've built into our platform to protect your data. Okay, and I think that was my last slide before I open it up for questions. But again, if you have any questions, that's my email down there, super simple, suhas@clumio.com. We'll be more than happy to go into more depth and, look into your specific scenario and see how we can work together to help you with the right solution. By the way, the link will take you to our application on the AWS Marketplace. It's a super simple, frictionless onboarding with guided tours within the app. So most likely you won't need any help to start protecting your AWS assets in less than 15 minutes, as I've said. But in case you have any questions along the way, feel free to contact me. Right? With that, I think that was my last slide, Olivia. I'll open it up for any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And that's awesome. Thank you for that. The extra 200 credits is fantastic. Okay, we do have a couple audience questions, so let's just dive right into them. So the first one is, how does Clumio protect me better from ransomware compared to other traditional backup solutions for AWS?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking that. So traditional backups are snapshot-based backups, just like the one that I've shown on one of my slides, they're great for operational recovery, for protecting your data from operational recovery in the cloud. But there are gaps when it comes to implementing a full-blown, holistic data protection solution. Number one, snapshots that are created using the snapshot manager in AWS, for example, they are created in the same account as your primary data. So there's no air gap or separation of security domains and spheres between backups and the primary data. So if the hacker has access to your primary data, they would have access to those snapshots as well, and you don't have a valid backup copy to fall back on in the event of such an attack. On the other hand, Clumio backups are air-gapped, and they provide you that additional layer of protection from hackers getting access to it. On top of it, as I mentioned, Clumio backups are immutable as well. So if somehow, let's say the hackers or the bad actors, even within your own organizations, do get access to those backup copies, they cannot change it or encrypt it. They're immutable. And another layer of protection that we put is that there's no simple delete option. You have to go through multiple levels of authentication as well as multiple users within your organizations that are in the right roles, for example, that will have to approve a particular copy to be deleted as well. So with all these safeguards built into our platform, that's how we kind of provide much better protection and protection against ransomware compared to some of the other traditional or legacy solutions.
Sure, which hopefully helps everyone rest a little bit easier at night. That's good.
I hope so.
And it does look like we are out of time, but folks, if you do have additional questions for Suhas, please go ahead and pop those into the console now, and we'll make sure to get those over to you, Suhas, right away. But thank you so much for joining us and sharing all that great information. And then, of course, we'll share those questions with you shortly so you can follow up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Perfect. And now we're moving on to our final sponsor today. I am so excited to announce David No. David is the CTO of Metallic at Commvault Venture. So with that, David, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. My name is David No. I'm CTO for Metallic, a Commvault venture. Today, I'll be talking about SaaS data protection with a particular focus on Dynamics 365 and Office 365. Many companies today are leveraging SaaS applications like Office 365 and Dynamics 365, and they're enjoying all the benefits of these services. Things like instant accessibility, borderless collaboration, enhanced productivity, advanced insights, and infinite scalability. And they get to sleep better at night, not having to worry about things like availability and reliability of those services. However, adopting SaaS apps doesn't mean that you're free from all responsibility for your data. Even though the SaaS services provide high availability and resilience, you're still responsible for the data itself. Things like compliance with industry regulations for data protection and retention. Also, the nature of the threats change when using a SaaS service. Data protection is no longer for defense against traditional threats like hardware failure and natural disasters, but instead, considering backups in the context of your complete end-to-end security posture is required. Backup represents your last line of defense against threats like ransomware and external cyber attacks. Even the malware makers have recognized this by going after backups first. In addition to external attack, you also need to be able to recover from malicious insider attacks, which are some of the hardest to prevent. Accidental deletion and corruption due to human error is as pertinent with SaaS services as it is to self-deployed services. And with all of these situations, speed of recovery is extremely important, as every minute of downtime from these events can represent thousands of dollars lost. Many SaaS services have built-in controls and features related to data protection, but dedicated backup software provides additional levels of protection that most companies need. Things like long-term backup retention for compliance requirements, best practices like isolating backups from production environments, flexible controls and capabilities like item-level recovery and point-in-time restores, and rapid restore capabilities available to you at any time. Data protection as a service is a natural fit for protecting SaaS applications. In fact, the IDC projects that data protection as a service will surpass traditional data protection in the next year or two, and this was a prediction made before the global pandemic. Data protection as a service gives you everything that you're looking for from a SaaS app in the first place. Things like the ability to implement rapidly with little to no overhead in terms of infrastructure or management. The ability to protect all of your workloads from a single console. Ransomware protection and virtual air gaps to protect against malicious insiders and other cyber threats. The ability to support hybrid environments on-prem and in the cloud, as well as the scalability and the flexibility to meet your business needs now and in the future. To address the new challenges in a cloud-first world, we built Metallic. Metallic is the enterprise-grade backup service for all of your critical data. It has a full portfolio of available services to protect your data no matter where it is. SaaS applications like Office 365, Dynamics 365, and Salesforce, as well as hybrid workloads both on-premises and in the cloud. Not only can it handle more traditional workloads like databases and file systems, it can also protect more advanced services like Azure VMs, Azure Blob Storage, and Azure Data Lake Storage. It can also protect your end-user data on edge devices such as laptops and desktops. Today, I'm going to focus on Office 365 and Dynamics 365 protection. Of course, security is our top concern. To that end, we use a multi-layer approach to security based on a zero-trust model. Our service is hardened against both external and internal attacks with controls that are captured in our SOC 2 Type 2 and our ISO 27001 certifications. We've also achieved FedRAMP High Ready status, meeting the high standards of controls and security for government data. In addition, Metallic provides a virtual air gap to protect against malware from making the leap from a customer's environment to the service, ensuring that your data is always ready to be restored when you need it. Let's take a closer look at our Dynamics 365 and Office 365 solutions. Our Dynamics 365 backup service gives you complete coverage for all of your CRM data, entities, records, forms, and more. All metadata is, of course, preserved for full fidelity restores. And we provide you flexible restore options and the ability to seed sandbox environments. Included with the service is unlimited storage and unlimited retention for your backups. Office 365 is similar. It provides complete protection for all of your data, including email, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. You can recover data down to the most granular levels, individual emails, files, file versions, contacts, calendar items, and more. Teams is particularly interesting with the growth that it's enjoyed recently. Granular protection is more important for that than ever before. Comprehensive protection and in-place restore capabilities for channels, tabs, conversations, and other data is available to use in a simple-to-use interface. We've been fortunate enough to have earned a number of awards, including a Gold Stevie and a CRN Tech Innovators Award for 2020. And Tech Target Infrastructure called Metallic cloud-based backup done right for a change. But what's even more important to us is great feedback from our customers. We strive to provide value, ease of use, and a great experience for our customers every day. The ease, reliability, and security of Metallic provide them peace of mind knowing that their data is safe. Let's take a closer look at Metallic. This is the hub, which is the single interface to manage all of your data no matter where it lives. You can see all of the Metallic offerings listed here. And this interface is customizable. You can select each tile to display or not display depending on what you'd like to concentrate on. Let's take a look at Office 365. You can see that this tile displays all of your information that you need at a glance. In addition, functions that you use on a regular basis are always here at the bottom. Things like user management, documentation, looking at tickets, and creating new cases. You can also chat with support at any time. Things like subscription usage and your backup plans, your success rates are all here for you at any time. Configuration is extremely simple. All you do is select a service to configure, provide us your credentials, and configure backups to run. That's it. You don't have to configure storage. You don't have to configure infrastructure. That's all included for you. We can handle data sources around the world for multinational companies that have data residency concerns. Metallic can ensure that data is stored in locations that are compliant with those regulations. In order to restore, it's extremely simple. Let's take a look at Teams. Clicking into the tile brings you to a screen that shows you all the data that's been backed up. Here we'll look at Teams itself, and you can see everything that we've backed up. Restore is as simple as clicking on a button, and here you can browse all the teams and all the information that we have available. Getting to the data you need to restore is as simple as drilling down on the left or searching for the data itself. We can go look here at files or SharePoint posts or wiki pages, and here you can either restore the data back into place or you can even download it to your local computer. Dynamics 365 is very similar. It's very easy to use and configure. Again, all you do is add credentials, grant us permissions to the application, and we can begin backups immediately. Restoring here is equally as easy. Here you can see the Dynamics 365 apps that we've protected. And here you can restore any table that you like. Here you can see you can pick any recovery point that you wish, and then restore any entity that you like. You can also do a similar search right here at the top. And again, everything is managed from a simple interface. So no matter what services you leverage or what combination of services you leverage, you can be sure that it will always be easy to use and easy to learn. Right now, for a limited time, we have a promotional offer available where you can buy 3 users and get 1 for free for Office 365, Dynamics 365, and Endpoint Metallic Backup. This represents an exceptional value to safeguard all of your Microsoft SaaS application data, as well as data on laptops and desktops. Don't take my word for it. Go to metallic.io/trial and try Metallic for yourself. And now I'd like to open it up for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David, and thank you for sharing how we can get a trial. That is huge, and what a great offer. Okay, so we do have a couple questions come in from the audience, so let's get to those while our team goes and selects the winner of our final GoPro. Okay, David, let's see. Our first question here is, are the same backup and restore capabilities in Office 365 and Dynamics 365 available for Metallic's hybrid cloud solutions?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. I think there are a couple ways to answer that. One is absolutely. We're one of the only solutions to protect all three of Microsoft's clouds, what they refer to as their three clouds, Azure, Office 365, and Dynamics 365, as well with our hybrid and cloud solutions, on-prem environments and other cloud environments as well. And so all of the benefits that you get, the automation, the ease of use, the guided setups, particularly with hybrid environments that might get a little more complex with, say, on-premises deployments where you need rapid recovery, but you don't want to bring data back from the cloud because of network limitations, we actually provide an even more enhanced experience. So our Dynamics 365 and Office 365 offers include, as I mentioned, unlimited storage, unlimited retention. Our hybrid cloud solutions give you options such as using local on-premises storage or even your own cloud storage.
Oops, apologies, I was on mute there. That was a great response. Thank you, David. We have another question that came in here from the audience. How is Metallic securing Office 365 and Dynamics 365 from ransomware? The hot topic these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all talked about it today because it is such a threat. And the included storage for Office 365 and Dynamics 365 does provide that air gap, both from primarily from a security domain perspective, where the storage is completely inaccessible to anyone in general. Actually, from the data in that storage is not accessible by Metallic personnel, and the storage in backup environment are not accessible by any of our customers. And so that way, maintaining that separation of responsibility prevents ransomware from making the leap and attacking what really is your last line of defense when it comes to a ransomware attack. In addition, our anomaly detection based on machine learning can alert you to unusual events and give you a sense of what's happening and where a ransomware attack may be happening.
Oh, that's huge. Excuse me. And just to wrap us up here, tell us your favorite part about working for Metallic and your favorite part about the product and service. I mean, this is huge. These are things that help, as you mentioned, everyone sleep better at night. So tell us a little bit about your favorite feature.
Sure, absolutely. And I think, the ability to solve our customers' problems across a wide variety of their environments, not just, and I mentioned this too, right? Not just new technologies, which are often kind of the shiny object and people pay attention to, cloud technologies and others, and being able to protect those, but also making sure they're completely protected from on-premises and hybrid deployments of their applications, legacy versions of their applications. These are all things as an enterprise data protection vendor that we've been paying attention to for years. I mean, I'm 23 years at Commvault and Metallic. And so we recognize there are things you just can't avoid even though you want to transform. And being able to solve those problems from one product for our customers and really providing value, that's really what's my favorite part.
Oh, most definitely. That's easily understandable. Well, thank you so much, David. We are unfortunately out of time. But audience, if you have additional questions, again, please feel free to pop them right in. We'd love to share those with David, and he can follow up with you at a later time. But David, that was great information. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, everybody. So it looks like it is now time to announce the winner of our final GoPro. Let me pull that name up that our team pulled. And the final winner of our last GoPro is Daniel Jenkins from the Holy Family Institute. So again, we'll reach out to you this week and get that contact over to you so that we can give you your GoPro. But everyone, thank you so much for attending today. That is it for our summit this afternoon. You will get a full on-demand viewing, an email with the full on-demand link tomorrow afternoon. So please go ahead and share that with a colleague. View it again. I know there was so much good information today, but taking that second look is always a good idea. And then just as a final reminder, remember that survey is going to pop up as we conclude here. Please feel free to share your honest feedback. It really does help us shape our future events and make sure that we're providing you with the content and information that is most helpful to you. But with that, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors that made today possible. Thank you so much to Druva, Zerto, AvePoint, Clumio, and Metallic. We are so thankful for your support and for making today happen. It is huge. With that, everyone, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you on our next summit.